Okay, so I will begin, and hopefully Joe is able to join us in the next few moments. We shall see. Okay. In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall, posting on the front door of Town Hall, forwarding to the Millburn Township Clerk, and mailing to the Item and the Star Ledger, which publications are the officially designated township newspapers, a notice indicating that this special meeting would take place on Wednesday, October 28th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. via the Zoom platform. Roll call.
Daniel Baer.
Here.
Diane Aglo.
Here.
Gaston Halpert.
Here.
Jorge Mastropietro.
Here.
Mark Matzel.
Here.
David Morrow.
Here.
Chinook Tana.
Here.
Vice Chairwoman Miriam Salerno. Here. Chairwoman Bev Zoll.
Here, thank you. We're going to begin by reviewing the minutes that were circulated from September 2nd of 2020. They arrived to us earlier this week. If anybody had any questions, comments, or clarifications that had not already been independently sent? Or did you receive, before Mark goes, Eileen, were there any changes that we should note?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to add a line somewhere after, I guess, the third graph to the end, where it says Nicholas Graviano appeared and was sworn. And I'd just like to reflect, because I know I voted that way for this particular reason. Sorry,
Sorry, is there a line number? I apologize, I'm not quite where you are. Oh, 332 on page 8.
Yeah, right. I don't have the line.
That's okay, sorry, yep.
But it says, I'd like to add, board members queried about the HVAC and filtration system due to its importance in a medical facility during the COVID pandemic. And I think that's important, as there are other proposals pending that propose medical facilities, and having an effective HVAC, air exchange, and filtration system is responsible planning. And the reason I voted against it, quite frankly, is that he basically didn't give us any information about his HVAC when queried. And he said, just know it'll be good, you know, which is inadequate during a pandemic. So I just would like to add that one line.
Okay,
Well,
so
send it to me, because that's not the way I didn't really get all that. So if you want to prepare something, otherwise.
Just, you want me to recite it again, or should I email it to you?
You'll have to email it if it's that much, because that's not really how I talk. So I don't really know your.
okay, so Mark, you'll clarify with the sentence added about the question that you posed regarding HVAC and and characterize the response that was given, which you felt was not adequate. I would just state it factually, not it wasn't an inadequate response.
Right.
That's your interpretation, right?
I'll just add the fact, and that's,
exactly.
okay, sure. I'll send that right now.
Okay, and given that you were a no vote, well, it's the minutes, so you're certainly permitted to approve the minutes. But yeah, that was regarding memorialization, sorry. Okay, any other further comments or corrections? Did the meeting adjourn at 11:03? I feel like I've been so careful to try to end them earlier, or was this the really late one, Eileen?
That was a really late one before we put a cap on it.
That's why we've started putting the cap on it. Okay, great. So that said, a motion to approve the minutes given the correction, the addition that Mark will provide.
Moved.
Thank you, Diane. A second. Miriam, did you second?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I guess those not in attendance abstain. I think, Dan, that might have been you. And Tara didn't attend. Okay. So minutes from September 2nd, 2020 pass. with the change Mark will provide to Eileen. Thank you. We have one item of business before we get to our application, and that is with respect to the Planning Board Emergency Regulations Resolution circulated by Council. Ed, I think you provided it and provided the context for members of the Planning Board to review. I don't know that we need to go into it any further unless you're available if anybody had any questions.
I have nothing to add. I think it's self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm. So if I want to allow the opportunity if anybody did have any questions or concerns. And if not, if anybody would like to make a motion to approve this resolution so that we can continue to have the remote meetings as per the health pandemic.
So moved.
Second.
You want a roll call vote, Ed?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daniel Bear,
Yes.
Diane Aglo,
Yes.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
Jorge Mastro Pietro,
Yes.
Mark Matzel,
Yes.
David Morrow,
Yes.
Chinook Tana,
Yes.
Miriam Salerno,
Yes.
Beth Zoll.
Yes. Thank you. Approval of our possibly quickest resolution to date. And now we will move into the continuation of application 20007, 85 Woodland Road, preliminary final site plan approval. Sorry, Eileen.
Do we have a resolution or no? Did I? The MSS Millburn, no?
I'm looking at the meeting agenda that was
I
circulated
didn't have it when the agenda came out specifically, but I know Ed did send the resolution.
Okie doke.
We can do it next week if you'd like.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Uh, but then
I'd probably
everybody-
prefer to hold it to next week. I'm just not prepared. I don't have it open. Yeah,
Let me see if I can.
but I appreciate that. Thanks. Sorry for that. Yep.
Beth, you're breaking up.
Break it up.
Okay, if we just want to move on to the application.
Beth,
Yeah,
you're
I don't
breaking.
know. Connection, okay, Lee. If you can hear me, Eileen, can we bring in counsel to begin the application? I don't know if you're hearing me.
Yeah, we're hearing you.
Okay. Clearer, or should I continue
No, you're
to
good.
call in separately?
You're good
Okay,
so far.
sorry.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, good evening.
Madam Chair. My name is Derek Orth, last name O-R-T-H, and I'm from the law firm of Inglesino, Webster, Wichiscala, and Taylor, LLC. And I'm here on behalf of the applicant, 85 Woodland Road, LLC, for the continuation of the hearing this evening. I'm covering for Mr. Inglesino as he has a personal matter to attend to and couldn't make it. He does apologize for that, but we'll just have to proceed and do the best that we can. So at the previous meeting, we introduced the testimony of Mr. Michael Lanzafama, who provided an overview of the proposed development, the existing conditions, stormwater management, and also answered questions from the board and its professionals. In advance of the meeting this evening, we submitted some revised architectural plans from Memo and Wasco, who are our architects.
I don't know if it's me or if Mr. Orth is frozen for everybody.
We can't hear him either.
Yeah, he's frozen.
He's frozen.
Ed,
Okay.
can I just, while we're waiting for Mr. Orth, did you receive the letter from Mr. Steinhagen?
I did.
Okay,
I did.
all right.
I think Mr. Roth is going to comment on that.
Okay.
Okay, hopefully he can rejoin us. Michael, I don't know if you have a phone number that you could contact him
Yeah.
or
Oh.
text him or something, just to, I'm not sure. I'm sure he's trying to get back in, but it looks like he just dropped.
I have a
Okay.
number for him. Let me, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. And while you're doing that, I may check in with Joe just to see if he's.
I just
okay.
tried calling
Oh.
him.
He
telling
said
me-
he's coming back in.
so.
He just texted me, he's coming back in.
Okay.
I did try calling Joe and it's just telling me user busy,
Oh, okay.
which I don't quite. Let me try again. Let me see. Joe, where are you?
So Eileen, I just called their house line. I'm guessing you're speaking to Joe on his cell phone. You're muted.
Yeah, I have him on the phone right now.
Okay, I would just let him know he can call in if the computer is just not working. Okay, the beauty of technology. I don't see that Mr. Orth has rejoined just yet.
Am I back?
You're back.
My apologies. I'm not sure what's happening with our Wi-Fi here at the office. Where did I last leave off?
You were recharacterizing what Mr. Lanzafama had testified to thus far, I believe.
Sure. Okay. So my apologies, Madam Chair, members of the board.
That's okay.
The internet's a funny thing. So as I stated, we intend to call Mr. Lanzafama to the stand. He has another 2 exhibits to show to the board. Number 1, which we believe provides a response to the minimum rear building setback issue identified in your planner's professional memo, and also depicts the relocation of 2 stairwells that were encroaching into the public right of way. Following that, we will turn Mr. Lanzafama to the board over for additional questions. And then when the board is concluded with that, any questions from the public. I also do have Mr. David Memo, our architect, here to testify. Should time permit, he is listening in and he is available. Now, before I begin, Madam Chair, as I previously indicated, it was previously identified that the applicant had inadvertently located 2 stairwells in the public right of way.
Before, I apologize, before you go too much further, and thank you for that. Ed, you had mentioned there might be something that Mr. Orth would bring up. I think you had frozen at that point, so you didn't hear the discussion we had regarding a letter that you may have received today.
Yes, I was about to go into that, but I'd like. to-
Okay, apologies for
Buzak
jumping the gun.
already said. No problem. I did receive a letter of objection from Mr. Steinhagen, which was also submitted to the board secretary. In that letter, Mr. Steinhagen asserts that the applicant's notice was defective because we did not include the property identification of the stairwells which intruded into the public right of way. In response, we note that this was inadvertent, and we will simply relocate the subject stairwells entirely outside the right of way and submit amended plans at the appropriate time as the board may desire. As such, we respectfully submit, Madam Chair and members of the board, that this objection is without merit and that the applicant be permitted to proceed with its testimony this evening.
Okay, counsel, is that acceptable to you, given the testimony?
Yes, I had spoken to Mr. Orth earlier this afternoon, and he had mentioned what he just advised the board. I'm not giving credence to the objection in the first place, but that issue is moot if the applicant is revising the plans to eliminate any encroachment into the right of way. So, and I believe we're going to get testimony on that tonight, if I understood Mr. Roth correctly. So, I think we can go ahead and proceed tonight. I did want to mention one other thing, Mr. Roth. When you froze, you had mentioned that the applicant had submitted some revised documents, and you started and said that you submitted revised architectural plans, and then you froze. So I don't know if there were other things that you submitted that you wanted to mention for the record before you began.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Buzak. We submitted revised architectural plans for Memo and Wasco, which included elevations and material callouts, along with the courtyard elevation. In addition to that, we also submitted a traffic analysis from Dolan and Dean. So I was just noting that for the record. Hopefully we get so far that Mr. Minow can walk us through some of those documents, but we'll see how we do this evening.
Thank you.
Would just, Ms. Zoll, just like to indicate that Joe Steinberg is here for the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome, Joe. And yes, we can note that for the record. Thank you. Nice to have you.
So if I may, Madam Chair, one last order of business. At the close of the meeting, we will be requesting a special meeting be scheduled in November. It's not an issue that I wanted to get into at the start, but just wanted to alert the board to that request, and potentially it can be accommodated at some point in mid or late November. So with that, I'd like to thank you. With that, I'd like to recall Mr. Lanzafama to the stand. I see you down there in the corner, Mike. Thank you for being here tonight. You've already been sworn in, so you remain under oath for this proceeding. And Mr. Lanzafama, can you please walk us or share your screen with the first of your two exhibits that you're going to present this evening and explain them to the board?
Certainly. I acknowledge I'm under oath. Michael Lanzafama with Casey and Keller. I'm going to share my screen now to address the issue with regard to the staircases being located within the right-of-way.
And before you jump too far, we're going to want to label. Yep.
Sure.
I don't remember where we left off, but I trust that somebody
we
does.
left off on 812.
Okay, so this
would be 813 if my notes are correct.
And what A13 would be is a blow up of a portion of the site grading plan that depicts the staircase entrance into the proposed lobby off of Woodland Road. And what A13 indicates is that as part of the redesign, we realized, first of all, that we neglected to include a handicap access ramp into the lobby. So the very first thing we had to do in any regard is provide a handicap ramp that comes up parallel to the building and then a perpendicular sidewalk to that ramp that would allow for ADA accessible route for an individual coming into the lobby. What we would also do then to eliminate the staircase in the right of way is simply remove the staircase. This would be an upper landing with a railing. The staircase would run parallel to the facade of the building in a southerly direction down onto a sidewalk, which would then tie into the public sidewalk on Woodland Avenue, or excuse me, Woodland Road. So in essence, the entire staircase gets removed. The landscaping in this area would be enhanced. It works out well for everyone, I believe. The second point of entry is off of Chatham Road. We would have to call this, I guess, A14, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
A14 is again a blow up of a portion of the lot grading plan, the site plan. Chatham Road is off on my right, and we had a staircase that entered a portion of the medical building primarily, and it was a wide staircase that encroached into the public right of way. Again, we would simply eliminate the staircase. The landing would project out. It comes out 5 feet. There's more than adequate room to do that. The staircase comes down, brings us down to grade, and then the sidewalk connects to Chatham Road. So again, in both instances where there was an encroachment into the right-of-way by our staircases, we're proposing to eliminate those. The drawings will be amended as we move along in the process. But our representation is that there will be no need for a staircase to project into the right-of-way. There was one other staircase, but that is clearly out of the right-of-way and not an issue. So we're not proposing any changes to that. So that's, unless there's any questions, that was our response to the query about the staircase intrusion into the public rights-of-way.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. I just wanted to check, you're providing testimony on 2 items? So I don't know if we want to go to questions on that, or if you wanted to finish both of your, or if that was it, I don't mean to.
Well, these were the 2 exhibits with regard to the
Perfect.
staircase. There was one exhibit that I had prepared that we never got an opportunity to show the board. And this particular exhibit goes towards the issue of whether or not we have the appropriate setback to the property lines, which would be lot 76 and lot 77. What I've just put up on my screen, I'll blow this up a little bit so we can get a
This
little.
is A15, or this is something we have not yet seen?
Yeah, this would be A15. And what this is a colorized version of, and I believe this is something Mr. Phillips had suggested we prepare, indicating the different tax lots. Because the ordinance, when it was adopted, there were certain setbacks that were tied to lot numbers. And what Exhibit A15 indicates to you in 3 different colors is that the bluish color, the gray blue color, represents the 4 tax lots that are part of the application. The greenish, yellowish green is tax lot 76. And I believe what nobody realized when they were crafting the ordinance, or when they were developing the plan, was that tax lot 76, which is on the western side of the property, actually has a finger that runs parallel with the development that we're proposing and terminates at the curve in the property line. The darker green color is actually the Arboretum property, tax lot 77. So the ordinance, as it was crafted, required a minimum setback of 7 feet from tax lot 77, and I believe 2 feet from tax lot 76. So if you look at our site plan, where am I here? Let me find it. There's our site plan. This was already marked. This was Exhibit A8 that we had marked into evidence earlier date. Let me just pull this up so you could see. You can see that the area in question, I believe, is this back corner. This is the southern end of the site. You could see tax lot 76 is indicated by the line with the dash. To the west of that is tax lot 77. So you can see the setback from the corner of the building to tax lot 77 is 9.76 feet. And the setback to lot 76 is 6.21 feet. So I believe we're compliant with regard to the ordinance, and that's not a variance situation.
Okay, thank you. Let me just take a peek. Eileen, if you would mind moving Miriam, she had gotten bounced, but she's back in as an attendee. And then I want to open it to the board again if we have questions for Mr. Lanzafama or clarifications on the stairwell or that property line.
I have a question regarding the stairwell.
Go ahead.
The question is on the second stairwell that you showed. You're not showing a handicapped access. Do you need one there?
No, we do not. There's alternate means of access into the building. The handicap access is at the intersection of Woodland and Chatham. So you only need one ADA accessible route.
And you've already got one.
And we already have one, correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Lanzafama, I'm sorry, just to further clarify that point, because I just am getting a little turned around. Does that ADA ramp allow you to access the courtyard, or only the building?
Let me go back to the site plan.
I apologize.
No, quite all right.
I was getting lost in the zoom ins.
Let me go back to sharing my screen here.
Mm-hmm.
Am I still sharing my screen?
Not at the moment.
There we go. There you go. So let me zoom out a little bit here. This is, again, this is the colorized version of the site plan. This is Exhibit A8. And what we have here, the areas in question was the staircase off of the lobby onto Woodland Road.
Mm-hmm.
And what we are proposing is to eliminate that staircase, have a staircase come down to the south, turn 90 degrees, and have a sidewalk meet the proposed sidewalk along Woodland Road. Handicap accessibility would run parallel to the building, again, make a 90-degree angle. Why this works so well is because there's such a grade differential as you move towards Chatham Road. So the handicap ramp is almost like a sidewalk. The grade is really minimal. Handicap accessibility to the courtyard is directly from a sidewalk area here.
Thank you. Yeah, and I recalled that, but then when you just mentioned it was at Woodland and Chatham, that was when I got confused. I'm sorry for that. Thank you for clarifying. Okay.
And just to further to Mr. Steinberg's question, ADA accessibility into the medical building is here. And then this is the staircase we were modifying. Okay, so this way you have an overview of the whole area. Okay.
Okay, any other questions regarding those? Diane, you can unmute. Diane, you're muted.
Hi. So if an ambulance had to come in with a stretcher, where would they go in? Where would they get access for that?
For what?
Into the medical building. If there was an emergency and the squad had to come with their stretcher, where would they access?
Right through the front door.
Is it
Right
level?
through the front lobby. Yes, it's all level.
It's all perfect. Okay, thank you.
No steps, all perfectly level.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Buzak.
Yes, Mr. Lanzafama, can you put up again A15, the colorized version of the lots?
Mhm.
And can you just zoom in on the on the tail of lot 77, lot 76, I'm sorry.
That's right here.
Yes, right. Now, the question that I have is that, did you or your office survey the entirety of your property as well as lot 76 and 77?
Well, when you say we established the boundary line based upon our deed, we did not take the deed for lot 77 or 76 and plot that over our survey. What I'm reflecting here is simply the tax map configuration of the properties involved.
Okay.
We established our boundary line. We knew that there was this finger from lot 76, and we used the tax map information to determine how that related to our property. But we did not survey, quote unquote, survey the boundaries of the Arboretum or the full boundaries of lot 76.
And did you survey any portion of lot 76, particularly that finger, to establish that the deeds and your survey confirm the location of that finger?
We had access to the meets and bounds descriptions for lot 76, not for the Arboretum. I don't believe I was able to secure a meets and bounds description for the Arboretum, but I believe we had one for lot 76, so that we were able to compare the alignment with our boundary line. And as well as you see here, the tax map information that we had available to us.
The purpose of my question, Mr. Lanzafama, is that we recognize that you can't rely upon a tax map for meets and bounds and for actual property lines, because that's not the way it's done. But if I understand your testimony correctly, you did examine the deed for lot 76 and compared the common lot lines between lot 76 and your property, and you are satisfied that that finger or tail, depending upon how you want to characterize it, does exist, number one. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that it's accurately depicted on your drawing A14 or A8. Yeah, that may be the other one that you actually showed us. I'm not sure.
That is correct, Mr. Busek.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're
I
very
have
welcome.
no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
You. Okay. Jorge, you have a question.
Yeah, no, can you go back to that?
Sorry.
That one. So I would like to understand a little better here the property line and the setback from lot 77 and 76. So I see here two lines, and I'm not totally sure which one. I see one line here. Oh, sorry. Oh.
Let me open it. Yeah, there you go. I'm just trying to zoom it in a little more for you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I see two lines here. Sorry, here. Oops, there. So I see two lines, one here and one here. Which one is the property line?
The dashed line, the second line you pointed to,
That's the property line.
that's an edge of pavement. There's a bituminous walkway that runs along the western edge of the parking lot. That's what those that's what this dash line represents. And the line with the 3 dashes is the granite block curb. The line with the single dash is the boundary line.
Okay, so can we go back to where you showed the setback from the new building?
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. That's so neat.
Get your marks there too.
So again, okay, thank you. So
This is which exhibit, Mr. Lanzafama, just to keep the record straight?
This is A8. This is
Thank you,
the
sir.
rendered version of the site plan.
Thank you.
So the setback from this line, which is the building line, and the property line, you said that there was 9 feet.
9.76 feet, as you can see.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I see that. So now if we go up with the, if you move this, yeah.
Like this.
Yeah, so what, sorry, can you remind me which one is the minimum setback? The minimum setback was 7 feet, right?
It's 7 feet from lot 77, and I believe it's 5 feet from lot 76 along this location.
Okay, so if we, and there the setback, I cannot read so well.
It's not 9.58 feet
Okay,
to lot 77 and 5.97 feet to lot 76.
and if we keep going up, we keep going with the same setback, or?
Well, no, then it's at the point where the phase 1, phase 2
Okay,
takes place. The building is set back 7.74 feet from lot 77 and
Perfect.
2 feet
Okay.
from lot 76. And I
Okay.
believe that's consistent with the ordinance.
thank you. That's it. That was my question.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see, Paul, you have a question.
Thank you, Beth. So not to complicate this,
Go ahead.
but since I drafted the ordinance, at the time I drafted the ordinance, I was working from what I believe to be the tax blackened lots for all of the affected lots, which are part of the subject property, as well as the immediately adjoining lots that are not owned by the applicant, including lots 76 and 77. And the tax maps that I used did not show the extent of the finger going as far into the property as is depicted on Mike's exhibit. So essentially, and this is outlined in my report, and I think at the time we were crafting the ordinance, everyone was aware of the tax maps we were using. And I guess the first question is to Mike, is he acknowledging that the property boundaries shown in this exhibit do not represent what the tax maps show?
I believe it's fairly consistent with the tax map. If we go to the cover sheet of the site plan, this is the cover sheet from the site plan. This is the cover sheet, the area map that we prepared as part. This is sheet 1 of our site plan drawing. To the right, the area map. This is a compilation of the tax maps put together to show the tax map location as well as all properties within 200 feet. And if we zoom in on that, and get really close here because it's kind of small, you see the finger exists right through here. And this is tax lot 76. And this is tax lot 77.
So
see the little Z's that are often done to indicate common ownership.
Can I don't want to belabor this, Mike, or members of the board, but the tax maps that I reviewed do not show the finger extending beyond the point at which the rear property line jogs. It shows,
here.
that's it. It shows
Right here, it ended here.
Exactly. That's the tax maps that I use. Now, they may be right, they may be wrong, and I'm happy to entertain any tax maps that you could share with us, Mike, but I use what I believe to be the official tax maps. So assuming I were right for the moment, and I'm not suggesting that I am, but the point was when we drafted this to have a 7-foot setback in that rear portion there after the irregular lot line to the adjoining property, notwithstanding or irrespective of what lot it is, 76 or 77. And the only thing I would add is if that were the case and I was right, you would be roughly about a foot short in terms of the setback if the lot lines were coterminous rather than if that finger existed.
That's correct, Paul.
We don't need to decide that now, but perhaps before the next meeting, you could share with us, and I could double check, but I looked at the tax maps again that were used. So I just want to put that out there that there is an inconsistency.
Well,
Thank you.
if you go to the town's website, actually, you could do that. And I believe the tax maps are available online, if I'm not mistaken. Martha can correct me if I'm wrong. But I believe this is tax sheet 19. So if you take a look at that, Paul, that, you might be able to see, because I believe that's what this was generated from, was the tax maps we had available to us from the municipality.
Again, Mike, we don't need to belabor
Okay.
it, but my eyes don't deceive me, and the tax maps that I reviewed do not show that finger extending. And again,
sure.
that was the basis for the setback. So if you prove me
Okay.
great, but I just don't think we're there yet.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
And we'd be happy to submit any additional documentation to Mr. Phillips for review and analysis. So we can handle that, as early as the next couple of days for his review prior to the next meeting.
Thank you. I think that's appropriate. I think we should mark that as an action item coming out from today. Thank you, Paul, for that question and clarification. That's on page 3, I believe, of your report. I see that the
That's
setback
correct.
question. Okay, thank you for addressing that, and it will continue, I guess, until we figure out whose tax maps win. Okay, additional questions at this point from the board. Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Beth. Michael, are you able to address the construction phasing of the project, or should that be done by the architect? I'll ask council.
It's a little of both. As far as the building goes itself, I think that's the architect. As far as some of the logistics with regard to isolating certain areas of the site, I can try to answer that. I know
I'm not as interested in the in what and how it's going to be built. I'm more interested in the kind of the temporal characteristics of the phasing. Could you answer questions of that, or should I wait for the architect?
I think that might be better addressed to the architect and myself.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll wait, but then I will have some additional questions after that, and I'll request that Michael be sworn back in for some questions, if that's okay later. Thank you.
Absolutely. Additional questions from the board. Mr. Buzak.
Going back to Mr. Phillips' colloquy with Mr. Alonso-Fama, in the event that it's Mr. Alonso-Fama, in the event that it's determined that the tax map was incorrect and that the lines for lot 76 in your property are coincident with one another, is there any ability to shift the building so that the setback that would then be required, which I think would be a 7-foot setback if it were coincident with lot 77, to shift the building back to comply with that requirement?
We have the ability to shift a certain amount. We have to be a minimum. I can get about 6 inches out of it. I can shift the building about 6 inches closer to Woodland Road, but I couldn't get the 1 foot. 6 inches would still make us non-compliant with regard to the setback. It would go from 6.21 to 6.76, and from 5.97 to 6.42. So 5.2. So we'd still be about 6 inches shy of what's required.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, we'll agree to cross that bridge once we have the resolution on the tax lines. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, perhaps I can note that we did notice for that potential variance just out of an abundance of caution prior to the last hearing. So we are in a position to address it if necessary. And we do have a planner that we can bring at a future hearing date to provide any necessary testimony with respect to that issue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I am eager to allow us to turn to the public and ask any questions, but I do, we have begun, and as we know, we hadn't had Paul Phillips, who our planner who drafted the, commentary, Mr. Orth, I don't know if you participated or listened in on the last meeting. So we're lucky that we have Paul here tonight to answer and clarify any questions. Mr. Lanzafama, I know you to some degree, we started answering them, and then and I think there was also a decision to kind of table them until Paul was here. So I don't know if you want to finish any other items of testimony with respect to Paul's note that you can address specifically, and then which might preempt some questions that might be coming from the public, or clarify them.
All right.
Or if you prefer to, we can open it up and you can answer them as they arise.
I think we should just hit Paul's letter head on and try and put that behind us if we can. This is the September 8th, 2020 memo, I believe, correct, Paul?
Correct.
Okay, all right. The first 2 pages, I believe, are just a summary of the application, indicating a synopsis for the board.
There's a question on the bottom of the second page regarding whether the units will be rental, sale, and the medical tenant, if it is described, near the bottom of the second page.
An applicant should, okay. Yes, these are rental units. They're not for sale. And the medical tenant, Derek, is that acknowledged?
Yes, it is. It's a Summit Medical Group.
Okay. All right, moving on to page 3. Okay, I think this is the area we just touched upon. The track setbacks, we just talked about
so
that.
Everything, I apologize for cutting off, everything italicized. So the very top paragraph is a testimony. And if that's not you, that's okay. If we could just go through anything italicized and just note.
Okay. Threshold.
It's regarding affordable housing. So that may be not your testimony, but I just want to acknowledge it. No problem.
Okay. The next comment is the applicant should indicate how the courtyard will be signed and preserved as publicly accessible open space through signage or other means. We've never contemplated posting a sign indicating that the public is welcome. We certainly are not going to put up signs that say, do not enter private property. But we had never it never crossed our minds to put up any kind of signage inviting the public in. I don't know if that's necessary. That's the only comment I have regarding that. If it's something the board feels is necessary, I don't know,
Can you just speak to, I'm not going to speak for the board, but I just wanted to clarify because I know the rear part of the courtyard per your testimony is
private,
quiet space for tenants only. So how is that being noted, or is it just a gate with a lock? And if you can get in,
it is a gate with a lock, and the tenants have a fob or something to access the gate.
Will there be a sign there that says for tenants only?
We hadn't thought about it, but there might be. At this point, we had not contemplated putting up a sign that says tenants only. We thought the gate would be security enough for that issue.
Okay. I don't know if any board members have questions or comments regarding.
If anybody has any comments or would like us to put signs, we're happy to entertain any suggestions the board might have that might make this project work better within the community. We're all ears and willing to do that. We didn't feel that it was necessary to sign it that this was a public park.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I think if you put a sign, it'll look like a hotel. I don't know if it's necessary.
Kind of our feeling too.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if it's going to have a gate and that you need your key to get in, I think that's pretty clear.
Right.
Mr. Tana?
Yeah, just to comment on the signage point, New York City has many such courtyards within buildings that are open to public access. And the way they handle the signage without it seeming like a hotel is in one of the facade bricks or somewhere in a not too conspicuous, but also not inconspicuous manner, indicate that public access permitted or something like that.
Yeah, the New York has a full privately owned public spaces, the POPs parks with a whole logo, and it's a whole program. I think that's much more formalized, but you're right. I guess the question is it necessary, or if people see that there's, a courtyard and a ramp and steps up, can they just go
Well,
in, which.
It's not required by the ordinance, so I don't think it's necessary the way I read it, but it would be a good gesture to have some indication that public access is permitted.
Okay. We can certainly explore some ideas with Paul or Martha and come up with some ideas. I like your idea of just incorporating something maybe into the brickwork, because
Right.
we do have some planters at the entry to the plaza. So
Right.
we can put something in the brickwork. That's a nice idea.
Thank you.
Let's see, where was I? Okay, we talked about, we were up to the track setback, which I think we discussed at length, and we're going to table that for the moment and come back to that. Building height at the rear of phase 1. The project does not appear to provide the required landscaping in the area where more than 2 levels of parking will be exposed. Namely, the lowest finished grade at the rear of phase 1 will be approximately 191 or 192. It does not appear to be clearly labeled in any drawings, while the 3 phase 1 parking levels occur at 187, 197, and 207, meaning that about half of the lowest level of the parking, 187 to 192, lies above grade. In this situation, the zoning requires that landscaping be provided to disguise the exposed portion of the lowest level of the parking. And where Paul is talking about is, let me see if I can find that. Let me go through. Here we go. So this is the phase 1 site plan. This shows the phase 1 as if it was constructed, and this shows the demolition that's going to occur at the start of phase 2. And the area Paul's concerned about is that this area through here.
Mr. Lanza-Palmer, you're not sharing.
I'm not sharing the screen.
No.
But I'm sure it looked very, very,
You got to
good
keep
on
me
your
honest
screen.
here. You got to keep me honest here. Okay. So the area, this is, if you have your plans, this is sheet 3.1 in our set of plans on the submission. And the grade, as you could see here, is about elevation, the top of curb is about elevation 191. And as Paul pointed out, the lower level parking here is at 187, and the next level up is 197. So you would have half of this lower story exposed. So what we would propose to do is plant a row of arborvitae in here, 8 to 10 feet high, that would screen that temporarily until we complete the construction of phase 2. So it would be a temporary berm. We'll make that representation that we're going to modify the plan to include that arborvitae row that would screen that lower level of parking as required by the ordinance. All right.
Okay.
Moving on
Paul,
to-
does that address your?
Can I follow up with that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So, and I tried to read off the elevations which are expressed in my report, and tried to get a sense as to what, and I'm specifically interested in the rear elevation facing the Arboretum, because this was discussed at the time the zoning was being put in place. And correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe your architect can also address this, is that a portion of the what would amount to the 3rd level of the parking for phase 1, I think in the rear, a portion of it would be exposed by, I think, a maximum of 5 feet. And the concern was that's the lowest elevation on the site, and it's the highest portion of the building, that notwithstanding that was facing the Arboretum, that we put in this safeguard to do some additional screening to sort of block that half story, if you will, of the garage, so that only 2 stories would be exposed. So I think that also carries to the rear as well, not just on that side elevation.
Yeah, well, here's the Arboretum here. There, you could see the contour here is 193, which comes into the building at this point. 192 comes down through here. So you're looking at about a grade from 192.50, say, to 193. The garage floor is at 187. So you're right, a portion of that garage would be exposed along that facade. You have the town's pathway through here. So, and I really don't have, I only have 2 feet from that property line to the building. So I really cannot put any landscaping through there. And then this is not our property through here. This is the Arboretum property where there's existing vegetation now. I thought the issue was just along this facade.
No, it was also in the rear, and particularly in the area where the building
here
is highest and where the greatest portion of that third parking level for phase 1 would be exposed.
And Mr. Lanzafama, is there any mesh treatments or any siding on the building proposed to screen? I think Paul is referencing, vegetation, but is there, or is it just open?
I would leave that to the architect. He does have some renderings that he has provided that show views from the Arboretum. And I believe that he might be better able to address that. I believe he does have some facade treatment that would soften that appearance.
So I would just kind of echo Beth's comment that perhaps, and I don't recall in the latest architectural plans that there's an elevation that is, or a rendered elevation showing that perspective. I know there was one done some time ago, again, when we were crafting the ordinance.
I believe I have a copy of that.
But perhaps as part of these plans, the applicant, particularly if they're not able to provide that additional planting, perhaps based on Beth's suggestion, they could show a rendered elevation to see the material treatment of the garage and actually see what that mass looks like.
Okay. See if I have that.
And Mr. Orth, I believe you said the architect is listening, so.
Yes, yes, correct, Madam Chair.
Yeah, and we don't need to bring and swear in right now, but I'm just glad that comment is being heard.
Yeah, and I took a note on it as well. So, Mr. Lanzafama, I don't know that you have to dig through your notes. We do have Mr. Memo who's available at some point to testify.
That for Dave to address.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, please, if there's other items that are for you to address, let's definitely do that.
I'm now on page 4, dealing with the upper story step back. The project meets the minimum width and depth of the required upper story step back at all locations. A minor exception is at the southernmost finger of the project. Let me go back to the site plan. What we're talking about is this area here. Under the ordinance, it talks about stepping back a minimum of 10 feet for a width of 30 feet. Well, it turns out the building is only 20 feet wide. So Paul was pointing out that technically that's non-compliant, but he has no issue with that. In the original plans that were submitted when the ordinance was drafted, this was 30 feet wide. However, when we went to the DEP, we realized that there is a 25-foot minimum setback to the stream corridor that's required. So we had to reduce the building by 10 feet. So that was the impetus of that change. And the ordinance was in place before that change occurred, or else the ordinance probably would have read a 20-foot wide section with a 10-foot setback. So technically that's non-compliant. And as Mr. Orth pointed out, Michael Toby will come up at a later time to provide the planning proofs to support that variance request.
Excuse me, Mr. Lonzafama, I just want to ask Mr. Orth a question regarding the notice. Mr. Orth, did the notice include both variances that we're talking about? This one related to the step back 20 feet versus 30 feet, as well as the adjacent property setback of 2 feet and 7 feet.
The notice included the potential need for a variance for the building setback, as Mr. Lonzafama discussed, the 7-foot issue, and also the upper story building step back, which he just described. And we also indicated a third potential variance, which is parking during construction, which will be addressed by our traffic analyst at a later date, although Mr. Lonzafama might be able to talk to portions of that because it's really related to the phasing of construction.
Thank you.
Great, that might be a perfect segue. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, circulation and parking. The applicant should provide a breakdown of the parking by phase to ensure that there is an adequate supply upon completion of the first phase for all uses. In particular, it appears that during phase 1, there may be insufficient parking to serve the existing medical office building on lands that will become part of phase 2 construction. The applicant should also indicate where the residential and office parking will be located within the structure and indicate whether or not the residential parking will be reserved for project residents. As far as the, let's go back to the site plan and to phase 1, my phase 1 drawing, or phase 2.
Which exhibit is this, Mr. Lonzafama, again?
This is sheet 3.1 in the set of plans. We had marked it as A6, Mr. Buzek.
Thank you.
Okay, and what that shows is how we had configured the parking temporarily for the existing medical building. We are basically preserving a good portion of the existing parking area, and we were proposing to cordon off that one, I guess the northwestern corner of that area and provide some additional handicap parking for the medical use, since their ADA accessible entrance is right here. So what this gives me is 36 parking spaces to support the 10,000 square foot medical building. And as you know, in your ordinance, the 10,000 square foot medical space that is to be constructed is required to have 50 parking spaces. 5 per 1,000. This has worked, this amount of parking has worked successfully for Summit Medical Group for some time. You'll hear testimony from our traffic consultant, as well as Mr. Tobia, that in our minds that this will function well for the time that it's needed. We anticipate about an 18-month, 14 to 18-month build out period for phase 1. So it's a short-term shortage. So we feel that though it will be adequate, and having 36 parking spaces for this space seems to be sufficient for our needs. As to the breakdown, let me see if I can find my notes. I had broken it down for my own edification when we were talking about the number of parking spaces that would be built under each phase. Let me see if I can find it now. Give me 1 minute.
Well, while you're looking, Mike, can I just comment
Sure.
On your prior comment? I would just indicate that it probably would be worthwhile for, I assume, is Gary Dean your traffic engineer?
Correct.
That Gary should be prepared to address the parking during that construction phase with the 36 spaces available in lieu of the the 50 that would be required based on the standard and the amount of square footage. And I only say that because every time I've been out to this site, when Summit Medical has been operational, it's been very hard to find a spot. And so I think you just need to be prepared that there's some adequate parking supply during the phasing to accommodate the medical use. So it's just a heads up for you and Derek and the applicant.
Gotcha. Thank you. According to my notes, under phase one, we would be building 153 parking spaces in the garage. Parking demand for phase one would be 119 spaces for the proposed structure. Provisions would be provided for 5 handicap parking spaces. Garage access off of Chatham Road will be at 2 locations at the western end of the building. The westernmost entry would ramp down to the lower level. The driveway just east of that would ramp up slightly to the upper level. And that would provide for more than adequate parking. As I stated, that would be 119 cars would be required. That's based upon the 35 rental units and the 10,000 square feet of medical office space. And will be in those 3 levels of parking, there would be 153 spaces. As to assignment of parking, I really haven't had that conversation with my client. At least I don't remember it if I did or not. Most likely in these types of apartment buildings, you usually do assign parking, at least 1 space anyway. There will have to be an area within the building. Let me go back to the site plan here. After you complete phase one, what you also have to keep in mind is that the one portion of the garage, this driveway entrance, which is the middle entrance, if you would, off of Chatham.
Again, what exhibit is this? Trying to keep
again, I'm referring.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This area, this portion of the upper portion of the garage, which is at the same level as the medical office space, would be an open area that would be accessible by the general public and visitors. So we'd have enough parking in that area to support the medical use as well as visitors. The lower levels would be where we would have the assigned parking spaces, and access to that area would be by a key fob or some type of gate that would control access to those areas. So we anticipate having more than adequate parking during once phase one is completed, and while we are constructing phase two, there will be more than adequate parking.
Okay, so we will be waiting for the traffic engineer for testimony on adequacy of parking during phase one construction.
Correct.
Okay.
Madam Chairwoman, before we leave this topic, may I just ask a couple of questions here?
Sure.
First, again, to Mr. Orth, did your revised notice include any reference to a variance for parking in the context of what we've just been discussing?
We did discuss, we did highlight a potential parking variance, Mr. Buzek. You know, candidly, I don't know that I would even consider it a variance. It's temporary in nature, but we did, in an abundance of caution, set it forth in our notice.
Okay, and I have to disagree with you on this. The applicant seeking preliminary and final site plan approval for the whole project, as I understand it. They're not seeking preliminary approval for the entire project and final approval for phase one, and then coming back for phase two. So for all intents and purposes, and this is a choice the applicant makes, and you know, it's has nothing to do necessarily with the legal aspects, although it may. But given the status of this application, at all times, this project then has to be in compliance with the ordinance. A temporary diversion from the ordinance needs a variance because there will be activity at a time when there would be required 50 parking spaces under the ordinance, and there will only be, if I understood the testimony of Mr. Lanzafama, 36.
Correct.
So I don't want anyone to misunderstand where we're going here. If that's what we're going to wind up with, then there is a variance, there's a need for a variance, and the testimony that will be provided, even if Mr. Dean's testimony supports the fact that, well, there's more than adequate parking for this reason or that reason, or empirical data demonstrates that, you know, there's never more than 36 spaces that have been occupied at any one time, or whatever it may be. All of that's fine, but all of that would only go to support potentially the granting of a variance. There's no way that the board can approve an application when it's being submitted and pursued in the format that it is. As I said, a complete preliminary and final site plan approval. This is it. We never see the applicant again. You can't have temporary divergences from the ordinance while that's going. You may be able to do that if you broke the final into phase 1 and phase 2, but we're not doing that. So I just want that clear now, and I want the board to understand this is not something that, you know, if the testimony supports it, that we just ignore. If the testimony supports it, then it's got to be testimony related to granting a variance. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Okay. So do we want to move from parking for the time being to the building and site design?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Matzel has a question. I'm sorry about that, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From my calculus, say there's 153 parking spaces. I'd like to see a minimum of 5% of your spaces include EV charging stations, which would amount to basically 7 EV charging stations. And given where we are on the climate end of the continuum, this is exceedingly important, and this is a really important project for the township. So I'd like you to consider at least 7 EV charging stations.
We can do that, certainly. We can look into that.
And Mark, just to clarify, is that in the public domain section or split between the residential?
You would split it up. We would keep some in the tenant space and maybe 1 or 2 in the public accessible area.
Perfect, thank you.
But we were anticipating doing some EV stations.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Just one follow-up, Beth, if I may.
Please, Paul.
So, Mike, I just want to be clear that will you have the minimum, I guess it would be 50 parking spaces for the medical office space. Will that be designated in the parking structure?
Correct.
So you will have the 50 designated that it's reserved for the office, the medical office.
That is correct, Paul.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Where are we? Okay, building and site design. This might be better answered by the architect. I think I'm going to just punt that one over to Dave.
That's fine. Well, it's fine by me. I don't...
Okay. Same thing with the materials of the facade. I think those are better answered by Mr. Memo. Service areas, trash collection and what have you. It is unclear whether and how the rooftop mechanical equipment will be screened from view. I think Dave would have to handle that, as well as the mechanical equipment. As far as the trash collection, deliveries, moving vehicles, trucks will be accommodated on site at each of the project phases. The trash collection is, there's trash rooms, obviously chutes and collection areas within the structure. Maintenance staff would wheel those out as the refuse trucks approached the building and came to the site, they would be able to take them out, wheel them out, and discard them. As far as moving in, what we had envisioned was that moving trucks most likely would park along Woodland Road temporarily, unload, and utilize the handicap accessible route as a ramp to access the elevator in the lobby. We don't remember, these are smaller apartments. You're not talking about a huge van line coming in. They're smaller trucks, like a U-Haul, single unit 30-foot truck that can easily fit in those areas and not be intrusive. And you're not talking about a long, time to eliminate or move the furniture from the truck to the apartment. You're talking about 1 and 2 bedroom apartments primarily. We only have a few 3-bedroom apartments that are associated with the affordable units. So we don't anticipate that would be a difficult situation. And smaller trucks can fit into the garage. They can even utilize, small step vans that might make deliveries to the medical use. UPS truck would most likely just pull up along the street frontage and run into the lobby to make their delivery. And as I said, smaller step vans can actually fit into the garage and park in the parking spaces. So you're not talking about, there's no tractor trailers coming here. There's no large super van lines, over the road type trucks moving the furniture into these smaller apartments.
Can I ask you to further clarify trash collection during construction of phase 1? I appreciate you just characterized it almost during construction of phase 2 when they can come in, but during construction of phase 1, we just talked about sort of the constraint at the existing Summit Medical Group site and lot. Where would that occur during that 14 to 18 months, I believe you just mentioned?
Right. Let me go back to here. So in here, that during the construction of this, the refuse for the building is basically stored in the building currently. So they just have their private carting firm would come in, pick up the trash from the building, and then exit the site. So that's not going to be an issue at all.
Mr. Lonzafama, again, what exhibit is this?
This is A6, Mr. Buzak.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. So this is not going to be the issue. What I was explaining more so was going back. Is this the right one? Not the right one. There we go.
Right, you were characterizing it during construction of phase 2 when phase 1 is
right. So phase 1 is complete now.
And what's the exhibit, Mr. Lonzafama, the exhibit?
A1?
A8.
A8.
Back. I'm switching between A8 and A6 here. So what we had envisioned is that the trash rooms are primarily located in the core of the building so that people can access them, drop them down a chute. It gets put into a compactor. So the mass of the refuse is reduced. They're put in small dumpsters that can be wheeled out. The refuse truck would pull up. The staff would bring out the refuse, dump it into the truck would leave. So that's what we envision for refuse pickup.
And do you know how many days a week that would be anticipated?
However many days we need to keep it to, so there's no trash overflow. If it turns out we need to have pickup 3 times a week, we will have to do that. And that includes recycling as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions, Gaston?
Yep, I have just a question about the moving vans and whatnot. So I've walked my daughter to school for every day for 3 years, and we've had people move in and out of our neighborhood. When they do have moving trucks or construction vehicles or whatever it is, a lot of times they're clogging the sidewalk, and we actually have to either ask them to move or we have to go into the street to move. How are you guys going to prevent the movers from clogging the sidewalk for all the people going to the train station, going to the schools, anything like that? Because it seems right now they're just going to be going in and out across the sidewalk with everybody else there.
Yeah, that's an excellent concern. the advantage we have here is because these are rentals. So in the leases, we can make sure that, you know, we know when they're going to move in. We can set aside a time for them to move in, and we can police it. The maintenance staff could make sure that they're not parking on the sidewalk. They'll be notified when they sign their lease that when you move in, you have to come to this door at this time. So we can arrange for all that so that we can make sure that they're not impeding the sidewalk at heavy pedestrian activity hours.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. Is there, can we get a time frame then to kind of solidify that to make sure it does happen? I know in the apartment complexes that I've lived in, there has been a certain time frames definitely out there, like inside working hours, but not at the hours of 8 o'clock and like 6 o'clock. So yeah, that would be great if we could get something like that solidified from you.
Sure, I'm sure Derek and the property owner would be able to work up some type of lease that would be a typical lease that we would put in certain restrictions such as that.
Yes, we can do that, and perhaps when we get further along in the application, and if the board is inclined to grant it, we can talk about conditions which would be imposed upon move-ins and move-outs. It's not an uncommon thing.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Jorge, go ahead.
Yes. No, talking about construction and exactly what Gaston said about pedestrian traffic here. Are you planning to have a sidewalk bridge during constructions, or how you are thinking safety for pedestrian, especially because this is an area, as Gaston said, this is very...
Excellent question. Going back to A6 again, going back to A6, yes. This is, we have a series of notes. As you know, the township has a requirement that the construction area is fenced in. So there will be a chain link fence placed around the entire perimeter of the construction area. We will make every attempt to maintain the sidewalk access during construction. And that's both on phase 1 and phase 2. And we prepared these demolition plans with a series of notes about maintaining walkways, certain precautions that have to be taken with regard to signage, debris on the walkways. So we are cognizant of that it's an important issue, that we have to maintain the sidewalks as much as possible. During phase 1, it might be a little more difficult for us to maintain the sidewalk. If we have an issue, we may have to divert the sidewalk, pedestrians to the other side of the street if possible.
Sorry, let me go back to my question. Are you planning to have sidewalk bridge?
I'm not following with you. A sidewalk
bridge, so people can always walk, not as much as possible, always be safe walking along the construction, especially when you are on Charan on the second phase. Your building has a setback of 1 foot. And if you understand very well construction, 1.5 foot or whatever setback you have there is not enough for a scaffold, is not enough for construction movement. So how we are, and we have also parking along Charan there, which people need to park, especially for the train station or whatever. So this is a very important question because people and kids live in this area. And when we are talking about the sidewalk, we are talking about families with strollers walking here, and we cannot make, because it's not safe, people to cross the street in the middle of the street to go to the other side. So my question is very specific. How we are going to plan to have always, not as much as possible, safety for pedestrians?
Well, obviously safety for pedestrians is paramount. I'll have to take it up with the property owners and see if they're willing to do that. What we have done in the past is to detour pedestrians away from the construction site to cross the street and use the opposite side of the street. You do have sidewalk available on the other side of Woodland Avenue, if that were the case, but I don't believe we need it since we're far enough set back on Woodland. I think the primary area is probably Chatham Road. If you just give me a second here, let me go back to the area map, the cover sheet. Let's blow that up a little bit.
And this is exhibit.
Well, this is the cover sheet. This is
Okay,
the,
thank you.
well, I could use the aerial, actually. This is exhibit, I believe we called this A2.
Thanks.
And what A2 shows is an aerial imagery of the site and the area around the site. Let me see if I can zoom in and get a good shot of the sidewalk areas. So you can see there's sidewalk available on the opposite side of Woodland Road. It doesn't look to be sidewalk available on the
No
other side.
sidewalk there. There is no sidewalk.
So we would have to take your suggestion into account, and I'll explore that with the property owner to see how we might be able to maintain access along Chatham Road during the course of construction. And if a bridge is required, then that's what we'll have to do.
So this is a question for our counselor. Can we have this as a condition of approval that they will keep whatever measure they have to take to be always pedestrian safety?
Yes, I think we can. And in fact, I was going to follow up when you were completed with your question to say effectively just that. They, just like we talked about earlier, the encroachment into the sidewalk, that's public property. They have no, just because they're constructing something, as you pointed out, doesn't give them the right to go over the property line onto, in this case, public property, and certainly block the property. So I think it's two things. One, I think we should impose such a condition, but I wanted to make it clear to Mr. Lanzafama and to Mr. Orth that that's not a question of whether the applicant wants to do it or desires or thinks it's a good idea. It's got to be done. There's no way that you're going to be able to block not only that, and you pointed out as well, the 2-foot area on the backside of the building. We have a walk, if I understand it correctly, we the township have a walkway there, a pathway, and this building's going to be within 2 feet in some places of that walkway. That's going to be a challenge for scaffolding and all the other items that you mentioned. And I think we need to make that, it needs to be made clear to the applicant now that that's not an issue of, well, you know, we're going to do our best to not encroach, or we're going to do our best to not block it. It's not you do your best, you can't block it, and you have to figure out how to do it. However you do it, that's up to you, but you're not going to be able to block that. So Mr. Lanzafama, you should be aware of that, Mr. Orth, and Jorge, I think we will put that in as a condition anyway. It's a belt and suspenders, but sometimes you need a belt and suspenders to just emphasize a point.
Perfect.
Now, what I was alluding to when I said I would discuss, what I was going to discuss with the owner was whether or not a bridge, a pedestrian bridge was necessary. We acknowledge we have to keep the sidewalks open and safe. But if we're in such close proximity, most likely such a bridge would be necessary.
Perfect. So one more question. This is about utilities. Just to confirm, all the utilities, especially power, is going to be underground, right?
That is correct, sir. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And the transformers for the building are located in the building in mechanical rooms. There'll be no outside transformers.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to suggest that, and this relates to the parking garage and the parking, I guess, garden or courtyard, that you visit the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation on 14 Maple Avenue in Morristown. It's a LEED Gold building with really a magnificent roof garden, thoroughly state-of-the-art green infrastructure, very cost-effective. And they also built a living green wall, which basically reduces, you know, carbon, and it actually grows on a wall. And that's something that you can look at perhaps for the garage. You know, it would definitely.
Is that like a vine material?
Yeah, it's fine. It's other things because
we actually did that in Springfield we did a 40-foot high retaining wall and we planted a vine material at the base and the top. We did that about 8 years ago. Now you can't even see the retaining wall. It actually worked out very well.
Great. Yeah, that I'd encourage you to, visit at least their roof garden. And there's one that I worked on, had oversight of in Juneau, Alaska, a parking garage that we built, and it's got an absolutely gorgeous green garden on the top. Garden. It's really terrific, and art interspersed on the on the outer side of the garage, so it camouflages the garage. But yeah.
Thank you, Mark. No, it's a great point, and thank you, Mr. Lanzafama, for confirming that you're aware of that. So yeah, we'd look forward to hearing feedback on that when we circle back to that item. Thanks.
Let's see, where were we? I think we were on page 5.
We are.
Is that where we were?
Yes.
Yeah, we're getting to the parking garage entry, screening, and lighting, I believe, is called out in this.
Yeah, let's verify whether facade lighting will be running. Okay. Elevation garage outside. Our lighting plan does not. We had light fixtures proposed along the street. Let me blow this up a little bit here.
Looks like that's exhibit A11.
I believe it is. Yes, it is. We have a light fixture proposed just to the west of each of the driveways, a street type light fixture like you see here. And we thought that would be appropriate for illuminating the driveway entry points. We didn't put anything on the actual facade of the building at this point. If you feel that's something that's necessary, I could certainly explore that with Mr. Memo and see if that's something worth looking at.
I think, Paul, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that is what your comment is suggesting.
Yes, that's correct.
So yes, and the answer to your question is yes, we'd like you to
explore that.
Go back, explore that, and yep, be prepared to, I guess, let us know.
Okay, and then raised planter beds are required along the exposed garage facades south of the courtyard. So that was the area here. So that's what we were indicating here. Is raised planter. This grade also comes up a bit. So this area here is also elevated. Landscaping plan openings. The landscape plan only shows landscaping north of the entry on Woodland. I don't believe so. Let me go to the landscaping plan here. We had, I don't know if we marked this one. I think we had a colorized version of the landscape plan that we had marked, but this is the actual landscaping plan. And you can see there's an extensive amount of plant material being proposed south of the plaza to screen the garage. We have more plantings on both the north and south side of the entrance to that phase 2 parking garage. So I don't know if there's, Paul, if there's something additional you want to see.
The point, Mike, is could you carry that, given the mass of the building as you come up from Woodland Road, can you carry that landscaping and all along the facade of the building that's facing lot 107? Or do something to kind of soften that a bit?
Yeah, we could do that.
I think that would really help given the mass as you come uphill on Woodland Road.
Yeah, we didn't do that because of the existing vegetation that's in the town park here.
Right.
We just did a lawn panel. We just thought it might blend a little bit. You want to have some open space, but yeah, we can explore some foundation plantings through there as well.
I think that would help.
Okay. Where was I? Okay. Okay, 107. Okay. So that open space and landscaping, it would be helpful to see more details of the type and number of fixed and movable seating, trash receptacles, and any water features or shade structures. We're talking about the courtyard now?
Correct.
Okay, so you're talking about the courtyard. We did an exhibit here, which we marked as A10, which we provided some details of the furniture to be used, and we gave you a perspective view looking from Woodland into the plaza area, and then gave you a detail of the landscaping materials that are proposed. Is this sufficient, or would you like to see even more detail than this?
No, I think this probably will suffice. I'll take another look at it.
Okay, great.
To just make sure it adequately addresses the comment, Mike.
Very good.
Mr. Lazafama, if I might interrupt you, while we're still on this exhibit, is the upper left, it's hard for me to read, but is the upper left, yes, is that the rooftop landscaping, and the bottom right, the courtyard landscaping?
No.
Okay.
What you see in the upper left-hand corner is as if you're standing here at the entrance to the courtyard, looking down through the courtyard. This gazebo that you see here, or pergola, is located right in this area here. This is the large shade tree that you see here.
Now, do I have it correct? There's also going to be a rooftop garden?
There's going to be a rooftop like plaza or sitting area or amenity space. Dave Memo, the architect, is going to address that.
Okay, is there landscaping associated with that as well?
Our office hasn't done anything with that yet, but we've been working with them towards that end. But Dave will be able to present what it looks like, where it's located on the building, and then we can talk about that at probably later hearings about jazzing that up or providing additional landscaping to give it some sense of space for the tenants and to give it some separation from adjoining properties.
Right. And Mr. Buzak, we did submit from Minnow and Wasco a rendering of a rooftop deck or amenity space, and it had things like movable planters and whatnot, which Mr. Minnow can address when he gets up to testify.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask Eileen, are those additional materials available on the website as of yet?
Yes.
They are. Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify and confirm that members of the public can have access to those updated. Thank you.
Okay, there's a rooftop open space, the lighting and signage. Yeah, we really didn't provide, at least our office didn't provide anything on signage for the medical space. I would have to defer to Mr. Minnow on that. As far as the lighting, I think we did a pretty good job on the lighting. We're using LED type fixtures. We got a pretty good uniformity ratio. We did an analysis for both the courtyard and the streetscape. So in my mind, I believe we're compliant with the ordinance and provide good levels of lighting that provide for safe pedestrian access while not being offensive to the general public.
And I recall we spoke with Martha, I believe, at our last meeting regarding any outstanding questions she had on the lighting. So thank you.
Okay, and I think we're done.
Beth, may I just comment on the signage?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So Mike, I think that it's fair, particularly since you know your office tenant, I think that the board should have the benefit of seeing what the proposed signage is and whether it conforms as part of this site plan application. And also, I think you should, if there's going to be any residential signage whatsoever, I don't know what your intent is, it should be provided as part of the site plan.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. Thank you for walking us through that. If there's no further questions from the board at this time, I'd like to open it to the public for questions. Gaston.
Can I just one more question? I'm not sure if it goes to Mr. Lanzafama or the architect, but we just went over landscaping, and I did have one more concern about pedestrians and landscaping right next to the entrances of the garage. That should be like, there should be a great sight triangle there to make sure that kids that are only 3'6" tall are seen very well by all the traffic coming up out of the garage. It's not so bad going the other way in, but coming up in the renderings that were the new renderings that are posted on the website, they have larger bushes there, and I don't think that's appropriate right now. The Pedestrian Safety Advisory Board and I think the township is actually trying to crack down on all that stuff. So if they could get it right the first time, it would really help us out.
If you look at what was marked as Exhibit A9 that I have up on the screen, now we were very cognizant of that fact. We actually stepped the building back so that a motorist exiting the building has the ability to stop well before the sidewalk and has good lines of sight in both directions. We kept this one plant material as a very low evergreen type plant material, so that both vehicles coming out get clear lines of sight. We were cognizant of that.
Okay,
And
that's very good. All I'm saying is that a lot of people aren't going to stop. They're going to roll through it. And just to make sure that they can see, give the pedestrian all the protection they need. So to keep the bushes down is all we're asking.
You got it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Are you hearing me correct? I'm getting an internet unstable. Are you still hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Mr. Lanzafama, thank you. You can unshare. I think that'll allow us to see more.
Okay.
And Madam Chairwoman, I know you're going to open it to the public, and I would ask you and perhaps Eileen to just go through the manner in which the public will raise their hand and be acknowledged and brought in and so forth, so that all of that is clear to the public who has been patient now through 3 meetings.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I apologize for not starting off with that. So just to build on that, the manner in which we're going to allow for public question now. So this intent of this next, what we're about to go into, is for members of the public to use the raise hand function should you like to ask questions of this witness. So specifically of Mr. Lanzafama with respect to any of the items which he just discussed. If you have a testimony and just want to share your opinion, concerns about the project in general, we would like to hear that. We would not like to hear that right now. We would like to hear that at the conclusion before the board, the conclusion, whether that's it's possibly a future hearing. So what we're asking now is for questions that Mr. Lanzafama specifically can answer, and not just, I don't like this or I do like this characterized testimony. So the way we'll go about doing that is we'll ask you to use the raise hand function, and should anybody be ready to ask any questions? I'm actually looking now and we can see if anybody chooses to raise hands, and I see we have our first hand raised, so it's functioning. Thank you, Dave Cosgrove. So what we'll do is we'll bring you in, and here you are as a panelist. You can unmute yourself, you can be heard, and then when you're completed having your questions and dialogue, you're going to be returned to attendee mode, and we can bring in the next person who has questions for Mr. Lanzafama.
Will you also, Madam Chairwoman, indicate how someone who's accessing the meeting by telephone only would be able to ask a question? I'm not sure candidly how that's done either, but someone I'm sure knows how to do that.
Somebody does know. It's star something, and I don't know if it's *6 or *3. Eileen, do you happen to know? Or not?
I thought it was *9.
I will Google it,
Okay.
because that's how we do everything. How to raise hand. Alt-Y if you're on a keyboard, and *9. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So that said, welcome, Dave Cosgrove. We can, I think, hear you if you speak.
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes,
We are, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. And thank you for letting me ask a few questions. A quick, just procedural question first, Madam Chairperson.
Yes.
I know when you were having the members ask questions, you were limiting them to like one subject or 1 or 2 questions. Am I supposed to do that, or can I just shoot with all my questions?
So it's a good question.
Okay.
I would say let's try to keep it to reasonableness. So if you want to ask 2 or 3 questions or you have a follow-up, that's fine. I don't think out of respect for other attendees who may also want to ask questions, I think if we can allow them to go. If you do have unanswered questions at the end, I will say now I will allow you to raise your hand and come back in should you have unanswered
Okay,
questions.
perfect. So what I'll do is I'll start asking, and if I'm taking too long, you can cut me off, and I'll come back later after others have an opportunity.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Mr. Alonso Fama, my name's David Cosgrove. I'm a neighbor who lives right down the street from this project. So the first question I had is a follow-up really on what Mr. Buzak had asked, and it relates to Exhibit A10. And it may be easier if you put that up, if you're able to share that for the group. I'm assuming people can still hear me. Oh,
yeah, we can still hear you, and here it comes. I don't know, Mr. Cosgrove, if
Perfect.
you're seeing it, but yeah, okay, great.
So if you could center on the courtyard.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cosgrove. Which one was A10? Was that
the one you have right now will work, actually?
Oh,
A9 will work.
Oh, A9.
Thank you.
So A9. Okay, we're at A9.
So now my question is centered on the courtyard, and based on your testimony, I just want you to confirm this. The courtyard is 3 sections. There's the section right next to Woodland Road, which is open to the public. There's that intersection which has the circle in the middle. That's going to be closed off. And then I'm wondering what that 3rd section is to the northwest of the courtyard.
This area right through here, it's what's called the upper level rooftop courtyard. This is actually a story above the courtyard.
1 story above.
Correct.
Okay. So then other than that, I'm going to call that the raised courtyard. Other than that, is there another section of the building, the rooftop, where there's a deck or a public gathering space?
Yeah, the architect will talk about that. There's an area that you can see the little hand here.
Okay. I can.
It's going to be right in this general area here.
Now, is that the only place there's such a deck?
Well, there's other little projections on the building, small decks for some of the apartments. I think that might be better answered by Mr. Memo, the architect, than myself.
Okay. So do you know am I better off asking him the size of the deck that you just pointed to, the rooftop deck?
Yeah, he would be able to do that. Yes.
And there's no rooftop deck like that on Phase A, correct?
Phase 1, not to my
Phase
knowledge.
1, sorry. The area where this deck is going to be, that the one you've actually got your pointer on or your hand on there, how high up is that deck? Is that on the 4th floor? Is that on the 3rd floor?
It's on the roof of the structure.
Okay.
I believe the rooftop at that level is about elevation 227 is the rooftop deck at that location.
So how many feet above grade?
That's
When
about
constructed?
30, 27. It's about 35 feet above grade.
Isn't that a section of the building that's a 50-foot section, tall section?
Not at that point, no.
Okay.
At least I don't believe so. Mr. Mino would be able to answer that more accurately than I can.
Okay, I'll save that for him, so thank you. Next, when you were being asked questions about the parking, and I'm going to call it the temporary parking as you did Phase 1, and you had a diagram of the parking that you were going to use to allow Summit Medical Group to continue to operate while you did the first phase. You mentioned that back door of Summit Medical Group was a handicapped entrance.
That's the only at-grade entrance that I saw in the building.
Okay. Have you ever actually visited the site and taken a look at that entrance to see whether it's usable by a handicapped person?
I've been to the site on numerous occasions. I didn't go into the building. I just looked at the at-grade location and made an assumption that that was probably how they would bring in a handicapped person.
Okay. Would it surprise you if you learn that that's not a handicap entrance? It's just a stairwell?
It wouldn't surprise me at all because these buildings are pretty old.
So during the construction of the first phase, where would these people who are handicapped, how would they get into the Summit Medical Group facility?
The same way, I don't know how they do it now.
Okay.
It's the same way they do it now, whatever that is.
Okay, and you gave some testimony in response to some of the questions about people, when once this is constructed, people moving in and out of the apartments.
Mm-hmm.
And you demonstrate that they'd be moving in and out on Woodland Avenue. Do you know how wide that street is?
Yes, it's approximately 30 feet curb to curb.
Okay, and there's parking on the opposite side from this construction?
That is correct.
And it's your testimony that even a small moving truck could park there and not block traffic?
Temporarily, yes.
Okay. And you know there's no parking allowed on that side of the street?
I understand that, but we're going to have to make and provide for some type of method to get people in and out. Now, if it means that we have to end up using the garage, that's what we'll have to do. The garages are high enough to handle a small moving van, which we can accommodate.
And you think that language in the lease is going to be able to control that effectively?
Yes, I do.
Let's go next, if you would, to I believe it was marked A4, which is the first environmental report.
That is the
dated January 10, 2020. I have it down as A4.
Oh, that's the
RAO.
The RAO.
And tell me when you're there, and then I have a question on it.
This is A4.
Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay.
Just on the first page, I'm sorry, you switched this. It was not Martha Callahan. Well, we're talking about the wrong one then. There must be two A4s somehow.
No, this is.
There you go, first environment, right there. Let's start with that page if you would. Thank you.
Sure.
That's addressed to a Jeffrey LeBenger at Medical Realty Associates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not addressed to your client or the builder of this building, is it?
That's correct.
Okay. If you could go to page 5 of that document, which at the bottom right says page 2 of 4. This is going to be part of the attachment. You're getting there.
2 of 4, okay, right here?
Yes, sir. Now, if you look at section C, if you could just go back up to section C, please.
Mm-hmm.
The box over to the right is checked, describing this as a commercial project. Do you see that?
Well, it says the site use, it's commercial, yes.
It says intended future site use if known. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, and it says check all that apply.
Okay,
And the only box checked is commercial, is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, and this is not a commercial, this is a commercial and a residential?
That's correct.
Has anybody at the DEP or regulatory agencies been told that this is not, that this is something other than commercial?
I have no idea. I did not prepare this document.
Okay.
This was done by the environmental firm, by Thomas Bamberg.
In your testimony, it may have been actually both nights. You made a reference several times to Summit Medical Group as the quote, initial tenant. And I found that curious. I'm wondering what you meant by that, that there's an initial tenant. Is there another tenant you have in mind or that you're aware of?
None, I wasn't aware I used that terminology. Maybe what I meant to say was that they're going to be the tenant that occupies the new space. They may not exist forever, so I guess they would be the initial tenant. But no, I would assume it's a very long-term lease.
Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Chairwoman, that's all I have. Yeah, I do have questions on that rooftop deck, but I'll save those for the architect based
I
upon
appreciate
what
that.
the
Yeah,
witnesses said.
I think
Thank you
there's
very
going to be
much.
lots of questions. Thank you for the architect as well. So we will
I appreciate the
wait
time.
till then. You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to exit full screen mode. I see another hand is raised. Jean Cosgrove. So. Thanks, Eileen. Okay, Jean, I believe you can unmute yourself and we should be ap to hear you or see you, whichever.
Okay, I have two questions. The one is about parking and how apparently 50 parking spots are needed and they have 36 for phase one. And I'm just wondering what happens with the contractors working there? I mean, I assume the needed parking right now would be with the building itself needing the 50, but obviously there'll be additional workers there and I don't know where they're expected to park.
That's an excellent question, something that we discussed to some length. During the phase one construction, obviously we would allow for some room on site, but as the parking garage gets completed, even though the upper levels, the residential areas are not complete, that's when the majority of your plumbing contractors, electrical, carpenters, a variety of different trades would be on site with their small or medium-sized vehicles. We anticipate them parking in the lower levels of the garage and utilizing that space to be so they're not clogging the roadways or utilizing the 36 spaces that we've allocated for the medical use.
Okay, and I guess a follow-up on that is how about the heavy equipment? Will they be out on Chatham and Woodland roads?
Yeah, and during certain phases of the construction, yes, that's going to have to happen. It's going to be very temporary. You're going to, concrete trucks might have to set up in certain areas. We're going to try and keep that all interior to the site wherever possible, especially in light of the fact of the need to maintain safe pedestrian access around the property. But there may be an occasion where we have to set up outside with a small backhoe or some other piece of equipment, but it would be very, very short-lived and no different than if you had a water main break in front of your house and it had to be repaired. So we would make every effort to keep that to an absolute minimum, but I couldn't tell you that would never happen.
Okay, and you anticipate phase one taking 18 months, a year and a half?
14 to 18 months is what we're projecting.
Okay, and this is my follow-up question, which may be for the architect, but I'll ask you. Is there anything in the plans for the building that prevents dens from being turned into bedrooms? And I'll ask you the second one too. And is there a limitation in the plans on how many occupants are permissible per bedroom?
I couldn't answer either one of those questions.
Is that an architect question, do you think?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, any other attendee?
Madam Chairman, may I just follow up with Mr. Lanzafama on that, an answer that he just gave?
Sure.
Mr. Lanzafama, is it your understanding that while the parking garage is under construction before a completion certificate or whatever it's called, I think for that is issued, that parking of vehicles, even worker vehicles, would be permitted during that time period?
I made the assumption that they would. How else would contractors are going to be occupying the structures? I don't see why their vehicles wouldn't be allowed to go with them. It's only temporary while they're in the building during that time period that they're performing their work. I don't see how you would restrict that.
Well, if I may, Mr. Lanzafama, and what I would anticipate, Mr. Buzak, is that the applicant would apply for a temporary certificate of occupancy to utilize a floor of the parking structure, which would have to be inspected by your building department, your codes department, your construction official, to determine that it's safe and usable prior to issuance. It would be on a temporary basis prior to the full occupancy of the garage.
That was my thinking as well, and I just wanted to make it clear that it's not. I didn't think you could just decide that we're going to go into this without having those prior inspections made and having some kind of either TCO or a partial completion certificate or something to ensure the safety and the ability to occupy safely those structures. That would be done by some third party. So thank you, Mr. Orth.
We agree. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Bear, I believe you have a question.
Thank you. I had asked a question earlier to Mr. Lanzafama, and he testified he couldn't answer the question, then he answered the question. Okay, so Michael, I'm going to ask you one more time, maybe a little bit differently. Maybe you didn't understand my question. I want to know about the phasing and the time of the phasing. You said you did not know. I asked you if you had any idea what the temporal characteristics of the phasing were. You said no. And then you just stated that phase one would be 14 to 18 months. Okay, so do you know, let me just ask my question, then you can answer. Do you know what the time of the phasing is for the deconstruction and the construction, both phase 1 and 2 and the deconstruction of the site?
I was informed we had a meeting prior to this hearing, and the developer and contractor had indicated phase 1 would take 14 to 18 months.
Okay. Do you have any idea about any of the other phases, or again, should I wait for the? I'm okay waiting for the architect if you're not comfortable with that.
Yeah, because I don't know what phase 2 would take. Obviously, it's a little smaller building, maybe a little.
That's fine. Yeah, you understand my confusion because you did answer part of it. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional members of the public have any questions for Mr. Lanzafama? I see, I don't know how to pronounce it, but B Bashir. And then also E Schofield, we'll get to you following this question. Good evening. I don't know if it's BB or B, but you can unmute yourself.
Hello. Okay, yes, BB is fine. 101 Oakview Terrace. Also just, on the other side of the pocket part from where the project is going to be constructed. Let me just start and stop me if I'm asking too many questions. Okay, so I'm concerned about the back end of the building, which faces Oakview Terrace. The round bit at the end. I think the question of whether or not there would be planting in that area was asked by Mr. Phillips, and I think it was indicated that part of that area was going to be, or the builder would consider planting in part of that area. But what about going around the bump, if you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I do. The southern end of the building where that narrow projection is, there's limited space. As we said to Mr. Phillips, we would look at putting in more plant material that kind of rings around the pocket park. But as we move behind the building on the Arboretum side, we have very limited space. We only have about 5 or 6 feet between the back side of the building and our property line. So that ability to plant in that area is going to be extremely limited. I believe it was Mr. Matzel that recommended maybe the thought of some type of vine material that would grow up onto the wall, perhaps to soften its appearance, to give it a living appearance. We said we would explore that as a possibility as well. But other than that, we really don't have the opportunity to do much of additional plantings. You do have the existing vegetation that is between the brook and our property. So you do have some existing vegetation to kind of break up that mass.
Oh, I'm not talking about across from the Arboretum. I'm talking about just around that little circular area.
Yeah, we're gonna
because you didn't mention that when you were talking about where you would do the planning. You talked about planning up to that circular area, but not around that circular area.
No, we would go around it as well.
Okay. What about also? I'm interested in the south end of the building because walking up Oakview Terrace, anyone walking up Oakview Terrace or living on Oakview Terrace and walking on the street is facing that. So I would like to know: are there any? What's the lighting situation going on or planned for that end of the building? Will there be bright lights? Will there be any signage over there? As a neighborhood, it might be unpleasant for us.
Understood. There is no plan for any signage in that area. I'm just going over to my lighting plan to check that out. There we go. There's no lighting proposed on that side of the building. Other than we did have a conversation with the township engineer with concerns about the pedestrian walkway that exists along the back end of the building. There are existing lights along that walkway that get their power from one of the buildings on site. And once that building is torn down, there'll be no more power for those lights. So what we had talked about was possibly mounting some lights, low-level lighting on the building just to illuminate that pathway. It wouldn't be very high. We'd keep it very low level, just enough to illuminate the walkway.
So again, are you talking about the walkway, what I would call behind the building across from the Arboretum, or are you talking about lighting going around, the bump and that little area that leads towards Woodland Road?
Not around the bump, but along the back side of the building.
Where across from the Arboretum, where the Arboretum.
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay, well, I don't think that's probably a good idea, because if anyone were going to walk back there, they would need some sort of lighting after dark, for sure. And it may be that would be a path school children would take, or kids anyway, even if they weren't coming elementary school kids. It's a safer path than going by the 3 driveways into the building. So you mentioned that the garbage is going to be kept inside the building, and I just wanted to confirm it will not come out of the building at all. It won't be picked up by the regular refuse and garbage pickup people. It won't be put out at all. Your contractor will come into the garage and take the garbage from the garage.
No, the garbage truck will have to pull up along the curb, and the maintenance staff would bring out the garbage to the refuse truck.
But it will not be brought out in advance of the refuse truck arriving. We don't anticipate having to bring cans and dumpsters out to the curb overnight. No, that's not going to happen. Well, or even like early in the morning. Obviously that would that would attract, there's animals that come out here in our neighborhood at night anyway. And this would make it worse. We even had a bear here a few months ago. So we don't want to attract bears and animals.
No,
or rats, things like that.
Our objective, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I know your objective, but you can say that it won't come out of the building until the trucks get there.
Correct.
What about medical waste? What special provisions are being made for the medical waste from the Summit Medical Group? Is that going to be kept in the garage?
In the building. Now, everything's kept, from my understanding, that the medical waste is kept within the building, and Summit Medical Group will handle that separately. That's done by a private carting firm that specializes in that, just as they do now in their existing building.
And about the garage, what, I don't know if you're the person to ask, but what sort of security system is planned for the garage? We have so many children in the neighborhood. They might end up wandering through the garage, playing in the garage, or who knows what might happen. We have a train station, it's possible evildoers might get off the train and go to the garage there. We don't have any place like that in our neighborhood now that's, dangerous in that way. What's the security system for the garage?
To be perfectly honest with you, we haven't explored that with the architect yet, but I'm sure there's going to be some type of camera system at the very least. There'll be security gates.
What do you mean a security gate?
A gate, in other words, like a gate that, like one of those cages, it's an open garage door perhaps, so that when vehicle pulls up, the tenant presses a key fob, the gate opens up and allows them to get in. Certain areas of the building are going to have to be, the garage are going to have to be open to the public for patients for the medical use, as well as the medical doctors, as well as visitors to the apartment buildings. So a certain section of the parking garage is going to be opened up, but other areas will be more secure. And we haven't vented that thoroughly, but I'm sure Mr. Memo and the developer will explore those issues very thoroughly, because we are as concerned about security as you are. Nobody wants to get their vehicle trashed or stolen out of the parking garage.
You said the police, I think at one point you testified the police didn't have any issues. Has the garage and security in the garage been discussed with the police?
The police had no comment on the application.
It didn't come up?
It didn't come up. They issued a memo on September 11th, I believe. If I could find it here, we could take a quick look at it and see what they said, just so I don't misrepresent anything. This was by Sergeant Travis. The Millburn Police Department has reviewed the planning board application, the location, he gives the address. This application poses no concern to the Millburn Police Department. So, but we can certainly,
very general.
We can certainly have a conversation with them and get some ideas from them about security. That's certainly an option.
What about the sprinkler system in the garage to protect against a fire? I mean, apparently there's not as much access to firefighting equipment as there could be. What's the level of the sprinkler system in the garage?
I believe it's going to be, let me just make sure. I'll confirm that with you. It's really a question for the architect, but I believe that it's the fire suppression system. It's I believe it's in, I could be wrong. I tell you what, why don't I just leave that for the architect, because there's two different systems and I don't want to misspeak and make a wrong representation. Let Mr. Mino answer that question.
Would it be approved by the fire department, by our fire department? Oh, okay. Can you guarantee for us that there will not be commuter parking in the garage? how are you going to keep commuters from parking in the garage?
The, the manager of the building would police that, I would imagine. Making sure that no commuters park in that area. That's parking for their tenants and for their, the patients for Summit Medical Group, not for commuters.
So, I mean, when visitors and patients drive into the garage, how will that be checked? That they're visitors or patients rather than just
Perhaps
people
they have to
just
check
taking
in.
the train?
Perhaps they have to check in at the lobby or with the managerial office or rental office that they're going to
Wow.
be seeing somebody or
But this hasn't been really thought, there's no plan for that at the moment.
No, there is not.
So when there's overflow, if the non-tenant part of the garage gets full, where will if there's overflow in the other part of the garage, the more public part, where will those people park?
There's adequate parking. There's not going to be an overflow.
Well, how do you know that there's adequate parking?
Because we've studied it based upon the residential site improvement standards as far as what a typical 1, 2, and 3 bedroom unit needs in the way of parking, which includes visitors. We've also looked at what the parking demand typically is for the Summit Medical Group. We know the number of doctors, I believe, and what the-
Okay, if you would, what is the number of doctors and other you don't okay, because wouldn't the number of staff in the Summit Medical Group increase? Are you telling me that the new building is not going to accommodate any more medical services than the old building?
Not to my knowledge.
Could that be checked out to see if the proposed staff numbers in the new building would exceed the staff numbers in the old building? I would think that part of the incentive to move would be to accommodate more staff providing more services in the new, using the space more efficiently in the new building would mean there would be more staff, more patients would be coming in. Is that not been accounted for?
The proposed building, the area that's proposed for Summit Medical Group is the exact same size as the existing building. So we don't anticipate, at least I'm not aware of additional staff that's being provided for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may or may not be the case. In any event, we have 50 parking spaces allocated for the Summit Medical Group location. We believe that's more than adequate for their needs.
And would that include the 50 spaces? That includes spaces for the employees of the Summit Medical Group, is that right?
That's correct.
So, but you don't know how many employees there are even now, is that right?
No, I do not.
So, but would there be a way to find that out? If, for example, I wanted to find out, how would I find that out?
I'm sure you could ask them.
Ask the Summit. Well, I mean, that's like, you know, like, okay, well, I guess maybe I'll have to, you know, you can't just ask the Summit Medical Group. There has to be somebody at the Summit Medical Group that you would ask.
You know, keep in mind that, you know, certainly in this time period, we're dealing with, you know, fewer and fewer patients actually coming to the facility as well. You have, you know, we're into telemedicine now, and there's a variety of other ways in which patients interact with their physician. So I'm sure we can find out to try and get some answers for you on those questions. We can ask the people at Summit Medical Group what their anticipation is. But in our early planning, we had determined that 50 parking spaces would be more than adequate for the Summit Medical Group, and that's what we've allocated in the plan.
In constructing the building, in addition to the construction equipment, there'll also be workers who will come there with cars to park, correct?
I would assume so, yes.
So that's, where will they park?
They're going to have to find, we're going to have an area on site in which they can park. It's, the building's going to be, the building just doesn't go all up as a single structure. It's going to be going up in pieces, and we're going to have to allocate certain areas and figure out the logistics. That's a problem we're going to have to deal with.
So would that be, you're only going to have 36 parking places during this year and a half, right? So would there be another place in addition to those 36? So they would take up, the workers coming in every day would take up some of those 36 spaces, correct?
No, that's not correct.
Oh, that's not correct. Okay, so where would they park?
In the area of phase 1.
There'll be parking for them where the building is being constructed in phase 1?
For portions of it, yes. And as we discussed earlier, was that we anticipate that as we finish a portion of the parking garage and get it properly inspected and know that it's safe and secure, those contractors would then continue to park in that area.
What about you're not anticipating, are you asking for any variances on hours of construction or noise levels? You'll be complying by all of the ordinances in regard to those things, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Well, who would know? Who would be able to commit to that or not?
We have to obey the law. There's
Right.
certain laws in place with regard to hours of construction operation, days in which construction can occur.
Right.
There's also noise levels that have to be adhered to. We will comply with all state, county, and local laws.
And you're not considering asking for any exceptions.
No, we are not.
Okay, well, that's good. And just quickly about these roof gardens, there's one the new one you're talking about that hasn't appeared on any of your plans before.
It's not on my plans. It's on the architect.
So BB, maybe I would ask like one or two final, because I see a few other hands are raised.
Oh, great. Okay, good. All right. Well, so I just wanted to know the first one, the one that's beyond the courtyard. What level is that on?
Which one do you mean? I'm sorry.
The first one, the one that we've seen a picture of.
So you come in off of Woodland Avenue to what we call the public courtyard. That is the more rectangular area. As you move towards the back of that area, it's a little bit irregular. You go under a pergola, there'll be a gate and a fence, and then beyond that fence is a more private area used by the tenants.
Okay, how high? What my question is, how high up is the third section of that area of that?
1 story up.
And will that be visible from the street?
I would believe so, yes.
So even though it's only up 1 story, how many people will that accommodate up there? How many people might be up there at a time?
I didn't figure that out.
What about the other space? How many people could be up at the other space at a time?
I didn't figure that out.
So we don't know the total number of people that could be on the roof at the same time.
No, you don't.
Maybe the architect might know that.
Perhaps.
And what about will there be a fire pit in either of these two?
No.
No fire pit. Okay, what will be up there? Besides benches and trees and flowers, anything else up there besides benches and trees and flowers?
Nope, that's it.
On both of them?
On both, all 3 levels, if you want it indicated as that.
Well, I'm talking about the rooftop. I'm only concerned now with the rooftop places.
Oh, okay. Yes, just benches, flower plantings, patio surface. That's it.
On the undrawn one as well as the one that you've had pictures of.
I can't speak to that. You'll have to talk to
You don't know what's on the undrawn one. Oh, okay.
Right. I think we will hear that from the architect.
That's fine. Yes. Okay. And thank you very much for indulging me in all those questions. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for waiting for we know you had to wait to get here, so.
No, I
Madam Chairwoman,
Schofield,
may I just follow up with Mr. Lanzafama on 2 items related to those questions that were just asked?
Sure, let's do that before we move on. And thank you, Eileen. You can have BB return to attendee mode. Thank you.
Mr. Lanzafama, are there going to be any kind of garage doors on any of the entrances to the garage, either on Chatham Road or the one access off, the 2 on Chatham and the one access off of Woodland?
I don't know. We'll have to talk to the architect about that. Let him discuss that. It's shown on his elevations, but I don't recall. I know we had some early conversations about like an open type chain gate, but that may or may not have happened.
Okay. Secondly, how was the number of parking spaces required or allocated to Summit Medical Group calculated, just for the record?
From the zoning ordinance, 5 per 1,000, one car for every 200 square feet. It's a 10,000 square foot space, so we're required to have 50 parking spaces.
So the standard in the ordinance is not related to employees or occupants of the building. It's related to the size, square footage of the structure. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the last question is in the third. It's now been labeled as the third open area off Woodland, the courtyard. You have the public area through the gate, under the pergola, the second area, and then the third area is elevated. And my question is, how does one access that elevated area from the second portion of the courtyard?
They don't. They enter the second area, we call it the second area, the private portion of the street level courtyard is accessed directly from the building. Now remember that third courtyard, we're calling it the upper level courtyard, is 1 story up. So that's accessed from the apartments directly into that space through the common corridor or what have you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Sure, thank you. E. Schofield, do you?
Yes, hi, Eileen Schofield, 76 Oakview Terrace.
And yourself and introduce yourself.
Okay.
Oh, I apologize. We can hear you.
Okay, hi, Eileen Schofield, 76 Oakview Terrace. Hi, I remember from the last meeting, you talked about impervious surface, and I just find it hard to understand that if you have 2 to 3 levels of garage, 2 to 3 levels of an apartment, how it can be almost better than just a layer of blacktop. And just following up on that is the southern section of this this area has a waterworks, a small, kind of small, kind of medium catch basin that floods a lot, a real lot. It goes everywhere. There are sandbags there now. I actually spoke to someone from the Department of Public Works that happened to be there because every time it rains, they have to go there and do all kinds of stuff because it's so ugly. They had no idea that there was going to be a huge apartment building up there. So I don't know if everybody's talking to everybody. Does this whole waterworks have to be redone because of all this new runoff? Because the runoff that's there already, it can't handle. It goes over there, it goes into another catch basin, and it's dangerous. There's been flooding all over the place. So I know he had mentioned dry wells, but this rises to a lot more. You're talking about 62 apartments plus 10,000 square feet of a commercial space. Are they going to be doing anything with Department of Public Works for this waterworks? And has this been examined? Because it's dangerous.
Okay. All right. So let's first talk about the impervious coverage on the property. Even though there's 65 apartments and 10,000 square feet of rental space for the medical space, it's placed in a more compact footprint. So it's more vertical than spread out. Think about a ranch home versus a two-story house. So a ranch house tends to spread out, has a bigger footprint on the ground. What this does is by reducing that footprint, you're benefiting in two ways. The first is that you're reducing the impervious coverage by over 5,000 square feet. That's a significant number. In addition, we're providing dry wells that will further reduce not the peak rate of runoff alone, but the total volume of runoff coming off the site, which is even more important than the peak flows. And finally, water quality. You're taking an area that is blacktop, as you pointed out, that is exposed to pollutants, vehicle oils, sanding, salting of the surfaces. And now you're taking that water, and the majority of the water coming off the site is rooftop water, which tends to be cleaner. And you're reducing the potential pollutants within the water column. As far as the regional issue you're talking about, which is the tributary to Van Winkle's Brook, that runs along the western side of our property. It enters into, it's kind of a cross between a detention basin and dissipation chamber. In speaking with the township engineer, she pointed out to me that in years past, there's trash racks that sit above the collection system that would clog on a regular basis and cause some flooding in that area, hence the sandbags around the perimeter. They have upgraded those trash racks, so they have been able to control to some degree some of the water that flows down through that area. But that channel drains about 365 acres of upland area. And those are all Short Hills properties, single family residence, street water. The water coming from our site is going to be reduced not only during the peak event, but also the total volume coming off the site. So it's really a win-win for both the municipality, for you, for the developer, because we're actually improving the situation. It may not be a significant improvement. You may not see water levels dropping significantly, but we're certainly not going to exacerbate the problem that currently exists out there. And it has been reviewed by the township engineer. I've had numerous conversations with them on the design of this. And as we pointed out at the last meeting, we went back. Originally, we didn't have the dry wells, but we listened to some of the board members' comments as well as the township engineer's comments, and we decided to include them where we could. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I still don't think it's correct. It just doesn't make any
Fair
sense.
enough.
But how about Department of Public Works? Have you spoken to them?
No.
So does the engineer go over them? Does she
Correct.
speak to them? Because they were really kind of shocked about everything.
I don't know why they would be.
Well, because they have to deal with the waterworks every time it rains. That's why. So, and they're worried about dense housing.
Well,
Right.
this will make their job a little easier.
Well, we'll see. I hope you're right. But I am betting you're not. but thank you for your answer. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. Eileen, I don't know if there are any further questions or those were your questions for tonight.
That's it. If there are other people there, that's fine.
Great, thank you. I think I did see another hand raised, and yep, Dave Cosgrove. Thank you. You're back in.
Yeah, thank you again. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, very good. A follow up on an answer you just gave to Eileen Schofield regarding that waterworks as it was described. You said it was, you were told it was upgraded. Did the town engineer tell you there was an upgrade there, or just that the grate you mentioned was replaced?
The grate was replaced.
Okay. So no one said there was an upgrade there, did they?
No.
But you just testified under oath that you were told that there was an upgrade there, correct?
By an upgrade, I meant that the trash rack was replaced and improved.
Okay, so
In my
let's
mind,
talk
that's an
next
upgrade.
about the.
In my
I'm sorry,
mind, that's
I
an
didn't mean to
upgrade.
cut you off.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I cut you off. I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, that's quite all right. I thought I did the same to you.
All right, so the next question is, you mentioned dry wells that you were talking about. And I saw the diagrams that you did, or the drawings that someone did on those dry wells. How close is the dry well that's closest to the brook? How close is that to the wall of the brook?
It is approximately 25 feet.
Okay, and you're aware that the wall of that brook is a loose stone wall that's used pin and concrete block as construction?
Yep.
Okay.
I looked at it very closely.
Now, is there anything that's going to stop water from migrating from the 3 or 5 dry wells you're putting in to that wall and collapsing that wall?
No, they're deeper. They're 8 feet deep plus another 2 feet of stone below them. So they're 10 feet deep. They're well below the wall.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions I had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, sorry, am I still on?
Yes,
You are.
Okay, if it assists anybody, because there were questions about how many people work at that Summit Medical Group, it's about 23 to 25 on any given day that work there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cosgrove.
Thank you very much.
Any other, either members of the public, or if anybody who didn't get to ask all of their questions and wanted another opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Lanzafama, now is the appropriate time. Okay, not seeing any. Oh, I see another one. Okay. Miss Schofield, you're back in.
Hi, just one last question. I don't know if it's for him or the traffic. With reference to those entrances, is there any way to get them off Woodland? Because Woodland is so narrow and so hard to navigate now that I'm so afraid of those 2 entrances there as far as parking. And also, not even to mention
There's only one driveway on Woodland.
well, can you get rid of that one then? That makes it easier to get.
It's just replacing the existing one that's there. The number of parking spaces on that level is very similar to the number of cars that are parking there now. So we didn't think that would be an issue.
Well, if you can switch it, that would be really good.
Can I ask just a follow-up question regarding that of Mr. Phillips? Is Paul with it? Yeah, there you are, Paul. I couldn't find you. Given the zoning that you developed, did that specify, I believe, where egress and ingress is? Like, did that
Yes.
specify the ability to have a driveway on Woodland? So that is what is as of right.
That's accurate, yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Just
But
trying.
thank you. No, I appreciate the question. No, it's fine. Just wanted to make sure we give you a sufficient answer. Yeah.
And
Thank
then
you.
just so you know how narrow Woodland is, that you would not be able to get a moving van, and you can barely get 2 cars through Woodland now. You really can't get 2 cars through. You have to, everybody kind of gives the old wave and everybody goes ahead. So it's going to be pretty tight. So I'm hoping maybe they can figure something out internally so that there will not be people there. Because right now, you just don't want people stopping in the middle of Woodland Road. It's very dangerous on a good day.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Yep. Okay, and any other members of the public have questions for Mr. Lanzafama? Okay. So that can close that portion of public question. We are now after 10 p.m. Mr. Orth, where are you? Sorry, I have trouble. There you go. Okay. Hi. Just wanted to check what you have on your wish list and
yes.
how we can what we can address tonight versus carry.
No, absolutely, Madam Chair. Let me just kind of preview the rest of the application. We have our architect, Dave Memo. We have our planner, Michael Tobia. We also have Gary Dean, our traffic consultant. So, oh, is my screen frozen again?
Nope, you're okay. Oh, your screen is, but we can hear you. But now we can't. Okay. Everybody else appears to be moving a little bit, who's not sleeping.
I'm back.
Yeah, you are. You were. There we go. Okay.
I will have to speak with Mr. Inglesino about the Wi-Fi in this office. So we have a handful of additional witnesses. It is past 10 o'clock. I have Dave Minow, I have Gary Dean, and then finally I have Michael Tobia, who.
Oof.
Frozen.
I know. Okay, it's regrettably understandable. Mr. Buzak, while we're here, you know, I know you're keeping notes and keeping track so that we can, you know, come back and revisit. Perhaps before we break tonight, we can re-summarize the next steps. I would like Mr. Orth hopefully be hearing that, because some of it's in Mr. Alonso-Fama's to-do list, and some maybe in his, if my notes serve me correctly. And then I think we will look to find a date in November next.
Okay, so let me go through my notes, Madam Chair, if it's helpful. We had a number of things to revisit in the professional memo from Mr. Phillips with respect to the architect. There was a request for us to submit a signage package, which we are going to do. There was a request for us to examine how the courtyard will be signage reserved and potentially incorporate some brickwork into that portion of the project. There was a number of questions with respect to the construction phasing of the project, which we are going to go back and address. We are also going to provide tax map information to Mr. Phillips so that a resolution is reached with respect to the finger of lot 76, which stretches in the rear of the property. And we will work with his office in that regard.
Great.
We will investigate the possibility of planting some shade trees or other types of architectural accents in the rear of the garage facing the arboretum.
Yeah, and I would increase that just from not just trees, but different planting features, I think, per the discussion, wall or something vertical.
Planting features or accents. I have that written down. We will provide some sort of confirmation with respect to the sidewalk, how we will keep the sidewalk safe along Chatham during construction. And I would submit we would, you know, should the board approve this project, that would be something we would also do in conjunction with the board engineer, you know, vis-a-vis some sort of a pedestrian safety plan or whatever is required by the municipal code.
So, sorry, can I say something? It was a safety about Chatham and Woodland, not just Chatham.
Chatham and Woodland, yes, sir. And then finally, Mr. Alonso-Fama, at the suggestion of one of the board members, is going to take a look at what was done with the Geraldine Ford building in Morristown. And again, that relates to the rear of the parking facility facing the Arboretum. That is what I had, Madam Chair.
I think we were also going to talk about moving regulations and understanding what you've done at other buildings, or I don't know if you're looking to us to come up with some of those, or you would like to share something that you're comfortable with. I don't know how we would move forward on that.
We can propose as a condition of approval, perhaps hours of move-ins and move-outs, which tenants would be limited to in their lease documents.
Thank you. Mr. Buzek, are there other items I'm not noting?
The last item that I had that has not been mentioned is the exploration of the installation of lighting on the building to illuminate the walkway, which will now be unilluminated as a result of the removal of the lights that are there when this building is being built and after it's built.
Yes. So our Mr. Lanzafama will take a look at that and coordinate with Ms. Callahan with respect to any comments or suggestions that the township's engineer may have for some low-level lighting to, as I noted, illuminate that walking path in the rear of the property.
Great. And I don't know if in part of your construction phasing item, I think that was the third thing I noted, if that's also going to include discussion of the potential for a parking deficiency during construction of phase 1. So the 36 of 50 units.
So as it pertains to testimony in support of a variance, that would be provided by our traffic consultant.
Okay.
I think the developer will have to have some level of communication with its construction management company and also work with our engineer to shed some greater light on the construction phasing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we'll wait for that testimony. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Buzek?
I have nothing further, Madam Chairwoman, on that.
Okay. Wonderful. And so the next, before we can wrap, would be to identify the date of our next meeting to discuss this, if we're going to do it vis-a-vis a special meeting as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would appreciate consideration in that regard. I spoke with Mr. Buzak earlier today, and we took a look at the agenda for the board's next meeting, which is the 4th, I believe. And it's my understanding there's already an application on that night, which will likely take up the entirety of that evening.
It certainly should.
Okay, so then obviously we're not going to get on for that night, Madam Chair, and there's no other meetings, no other regular meeting scheduled for November. So we are requesting some consideration of a special meeting, and the two dates that our internal team has identified. We kept them both on Wednesdays to be in conformity with the board's general meeting practice, but it is November 11th and November 18th.
Right. That makes sense. I'd ask if we could look to the 18th first, just because we're meeting this week as well as next Wednesday. So that would give the board a week off, unless we have a lot of issues with our professionals regarding November 18th.
I have a already scheduled meeting for one of the boards on that Wednesday.
Okay. And what about the 11th, Ed?
The 11th works.
The 11th is Veterans Day.
Veterans Day.
It's closed. Town hall's closed.
Okay. And so we cannot have a meeting? I don't know. What's any day these days? Okay. So that we would potentially look to a different day of the week.
Yes, so I will have Mr. Minnow's listening in, and he can text me with his availability, but Mr. Lanzafama, I think we're going to be recalling you for some of these answers to the questions we just identified. So what is, and if you're not generally available, Mr. Lanzafama, then I would say we would restart with Mr. Minnow and recall Mr. Lanzafama at a later date. So Mike, what is your calendar like on?
I would just say also from a standpoint of our municipality, I think Tuesdays are a non-starter. Is that correct? Eileen, both Mondays and Tuesdays, I believe, have meetings between historic preservation, township committee, zoning. Okay. Do you know if Thursday the 12th or 19th is available?
It should be, because I believe HPC is the first Thursday of the month. So.
Yeah, I'm available the 12th and the 19th, Derek.
Thank you. And Mr. Meno, can you send me a message?
Madam Chair, when I'm available on the 19th, I'm not available on the 12th.
So Ed, you are available on the 19th.
Yes.
What about members of the board? I guess if any, okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. We're talking about potentially having a meeting Thursday, November 19th. Okay, thank you guys. Thumbs up all around. Mr. Phillips.
I may have a problem on the 19th.
Okay.
Good the 11th and the 18th, though.
Thanks, Paul.
We obviously don't represent the same clients.
If it's
I have our next regular meeting is on the 2nd of December.
Yes.
And so I'm not sure we're not getting close to that. I don't know if we have anything scheduled. I recognize that's not a special meeting, but sometimes special meetings, particularly in November, are difficult. They don't get any better in December, I suppose, either. But November is a little bit tougher because of the Thanksgiving holidays and so forth, and people have scheduled things because the league was going to have their convention typically the week before Thanksgiving. So meetings were changed to accommodate that back at the beginning of the year, and they've remained on the schedule and haven't changed. So that's what causes some of these issues, at least for me.
Understood. So Eileen, in addition, I mean, obviously there's a chance that whatever happens next week might carry, but is there anything else for the 2nd as of now?
I don't have anything on for the 2nd. Well, I do have two applications one application that's waiting to be deemed complete, but obviously this would get priority over that.
Okay.
Currently, the December 2nd meeting that has nothing on it.
Okay. And another consideration is we could proceed and hear testimony from perhaps the traffic engineer on part of the application without having the benefit of Paul there. But I do think there's, as the architect is going to address a lot of your comments, I think that would be just helpful to have you participate.
Yeah, I'll defer to the board, Madam Chair. I would expect probably a half hour of Mr. Lanzafama again, and then the architect would take up the balance. And I think there would be a lot of interest in the architecture testimony, listening to the questions from the public today. So I certainly don't want to shortchange him.
Yeah. Would you be open to then us having December 2nd be this next meeting, or?
Yes, yeah, we wanted to request the special meeting, and if it was at all possible, if the board could accommodate it, but we understand there's holidays in the month, so and there's a lot of very busy professionals, which is a good thing. So if that is the earliest we can get a meeting on, we would take the 2nd, Madam Chair.
Okay, unfortunately, I think that might be the best compromise or way to address this. But I'm glad we could accommodate you tonight with special meeting, and then yeah, we would have you be the front and center topic of discussion on the 2nd, I think.
Thank you. So we appreciate that, and so Madam Chair, we would just ask you do the customary motion to close and to carry the meeting without further notice to the 2nd, and that's all.
Great. And before we move to close with that, Mr. Buzak, is there anything else that we would need to cover tonight?
No, I think that's it, and we'll make the announcement in a moment.
Great, thank you. So we would make a motion to carry, but without having to have this application, which I don't have the number in front of me, 20007?
Correct.
Would be carried without need to further notice.
Right, it would be carried to a meeting at 7:30 on December 2, 2020, and that meeting will likewise be held virtually with the information being provided on the website as it has in the past for access both audio and video or audio only.
I would make that motion as stated eloquently by Mr. Buzak. Would anybody second that?
I will second.
Thank you. Do we just do it all in favor?
Yes, that's fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes, thumbs up, ayes. Okay. Any opposed?
The only other thing I'd like to ask is, Eileen, do we have an extension of time? I haven't been calculating or following the time to act, but I would assume that Mr. Roth would grant the extension if we needed it.
We had, we received a consent to an extension of time until October 31st.
Okay, so we'll need another extension that would go at least through December or through mid-December to get us through, just in case for some reason, the December 2nd meeting is not held. I don't want to be in a position where we don't, and I say that only because of weather conditions or something, although obviously using this kind of mechanism that hopefully will not be a problem as it has been other times with weather and so forth. But anyway, Mr. Roth, I would assume you wouldn't have any objection to extending this to the end of the year through December 31.
No objection, Mr. Buzak. The applicant extends through the end of the year.
Thank you, sir.
Fantastic. Do we need to move and approve that, or that it stands?
No, I think that's fine. That's really a unilateral action by the applicant.
Thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, one quick question, if I may. This is now totally unrelated. I want to close business. All good. Can I ask Mr. Lanzafama if they have a 3D model, like a virtual 3D model that he might be able to share with us next time?
I don't have one. I'd have to talk to the architect to see if he has something.
Okay, and if you don't worry about it. I just thought it might be.
I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mark, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'd like Mr. Memo to address energy demand, the next meeting, and consumption, and anything that that he can do. I know he's got a lot of experience in overseeing LEED constructed buildings, but to make this consistent with like a LEED silver model, and he's got, I mean, at least from his website, at least a dozen projects that I've seen that are recent. And also, one of the public commenters talked about flooding in the creek. I'd be interested to see if we can get more permeable pavers, or I know you said it was difficult to squeeze in a rain garden, but it might be that we can do the rain garden where the chambers are, and you can reduce or you can increase infiltration on the site to reduce runoff, and maybe try to get closer to 100% on a 3-inch rainstorm of stormwater capture would be a good goal. You know, it might not be as possible given the space, but I've seen some really successful models work with rain gardens.
Okay, so that's a
We'll
teaser
take a
of
look.
things to come. Thank you.
I've added it to the list.
Thank you.
Okay, that said, it's 10:30 p.m. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Joe. A second?
I second that.
Thank you, Jorge. Okay, meeting adjourned. We will meet again next Wednesday, November 4th, back to our regular scheduled planning board meeting. Thank you all. Good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
evening,
Good
everyone.
evening, everyone. Be here.
Hey Beth, I have a quick question for you
Sure.
before you hang out. Next week I have a conflict, but I probably won't be able to log in like at 7:30. So what happens? Are we permitted to arrive late or not? And
Yes,
then what happens if we miss some of the testimony? Like, how do we,
Can't vote.
I
So-
can't vote then, right?
There's two options. So
Okay.
one, if we hear the entirety of the application and we're taking a vote that night, you would not be allowed to vote. However, if it carries,
Okay.
then you would have the opportunity to go back, watch any part that you missed, and then you would, then you would be
Okay.
considered to be fully up to date. So you would have to do that, which is what
Okay, okay.
Gaston did today. For example, he was not at our last meeting, but he watched it.
Got it. Okay. Sounds good. So likely it's probably going to carry the next application, I would think.
This is, it's going to be, it's going to be a
big one. It's a big one.
Another
Okay.
big one.
Okay. All right.
Big way to go out with 2020.
But expect nothing less.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you all.